Why am I sharing the wrong screen? Yep. Okay.
I'd like to call the meeting to order, the Grand Haven Board of Light and Power, the meeting of Thursday, October 15th. We also like to welcome those who are listening to us on Zoom, and we are prepared to accept your comments and calls at the proper time. We'd like to begin by having Renee call the order, the roll call, and we do not have any absent members, so we will not have to excuse anyone.
Here. Director Pete? Here. Director Nasser? Here. Director Little?
Here.
Chairperson Smith?
Here. Next item on the agenda is to approve the meeting agenda, including consent agenda, other agenda items, and any additions or deletions that we have. What is your pleasure?
I'll make the motion.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Consent agenda, items A through D. What's your pleasure?
I'll make the motion.
Comments or questions? John? Yeah. I don't see it lighting up, John.
Lincoln?
If you got,
Then you're waiting, there's too many on. Somebody has to get off. I'm on.
Like on the minutes of October 1st, on the second page, a third paragraph says, Director Nasser questioned the city attorney on section 4.10 of the charter. Actually, I questioned the city attorney on sections 10, 17, 20, 21, and 22 of the proposed bylaws, plus section 4.10 of the charter. I'd like these minutes to be amended to show that. Also, I have a question regarding financial.
Did we have a motion to?
we did.
We do.
We had a motion and support.
This question is for you, Dave. Under liabilities on the balance sheet, and the bond anticipated note payable, $8,191,700. I take it we've taken out a short-term loan. Is there a maximum to it? Can you talk to us about it?
Yeah, the board approved this, approved essentially a line of credit up to $20 million. And we're drawing upon that. This was approved by you, John, or by the board. And this is just reflecting those transactions. And what's happening is that's primarily the demolition costs and the site remediation costs today.
So those are the costs that's the amount we've borrowed to date to pay against
Yeah,
what we've done.
Yeah, the borrowing works like a line of credit. It's called a bond anticipation note, but it's being drawn upon as we use it. So that's money spent, and we only pay the interest on the monies that are actually spent.
Thank you.
Further comments, questions?
I did want to, if I could for just a moment, I did specifically as it relates to the financial statements this month, I did highlight, because I do think it's important at this point in time, in my general manager's report, a couple sections of the financial report. We are now at the first quarter of the financial or the fiscal year, and we did have the sales volume is up about 2.7% over the last fiscal year. So that's the first highlight that I had. But secondly, what is going to happen is our auditors are coming on our first meeting in November to present their audited financial statements, and they've made some pretty substantial fiscal year end adjustments that I have talked to you about, but I want to make sure that, because if you compare this financial report that you have with the financial report that's coming that has the year end adjustments in, there's going to be several significant year end adjustments. The first one I talked to you already about, which was the unfunded liabilities for our pension plan. The actuarial report that came on December 31st had substantial changes in the unfunded liability, and those changes have not been made in our financial statements yet, and they're made as a year-end adjustment. That's historical. That's how we've treated it. That will be that adjustment will be an operating expense on your income statement, and I don't have the exact number. I think it's well over $2 million. So that will come out of your operating income. Additionally, there'll be a non-operating expense that is related to the expenses, and the auditors have said that we need to expense it all as we go through it, the demolition and the site remediation, which to date was over $6 million. So you're going to have a very significant net loss for fiscal year 2020 that we had reported to you on the preliminary statements that you had a positive gain. So it's a pretty substantial adjustment. I think it does reflect accurately the situation that the BLP is in at this point in time. And quite frankly, reporting it the other direction, and that's why I was so clear, and that's why I want to highlight it so it doesn't come as a concern for you. This is actually what we've been telling you for the last 3 or 4 months, but it will be very apparent when you get the audited financial report. And I would just ask you to probably, in that regard, if there's any questions, come and prepared to ask the auditors about it and why they're doing certain things the way they are. But I think those are the kind of the highlights. The other thing, just a report here, and I have been reporting on it regularly. It doesn't seem to be getting out because we're having a lot of reports out there that suggest that we aren't substantially increasing our renewable energy purchases every month. For this calendar year, our renewable purchases are up 51%, and as we phase in the solar energy that we've already purchased, that was reported in the Tribune, that amount will go up to almost 25% of our energy purchases by 2022. So, and that's going to substantially dwarf any kind of energy that's produced by our new facility that we're pulling. So for some reason, we are reporting it. We are talking about it. It's in the annual, it's in my report every month. The increased renewable energy that we are buying. For some reason, it's not getting reported. So that's why I'm trying to highlight it specifically, so that when people look at the annual report or my general manager report, it is something that's in every single month. We are reporting it, specifically highlighting it, and for some reason, the information isn't getting out. Other than that, I don't have anything else on the consent agenda.
Any questions or comments? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. Next item,
I think we're at
public comment. Oh, no, we just finished the consent agenda and we're at public comment. So I turn that over to you and Rob.
okay, Rob. Do we have any public comment?
At this time, if anybody would like to make public comment, please raise your hand via Zoom, and I will unmute you so you can get started. Please raise your hand in Zoom. I can't see everybody's picture, so you have to raise your hand and zoom in the participant field, please.
My hand is up and I am unmuted.
Go ahead, Shannon.
Yes.
Go
Hello.
ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone. Basically, I don't think I joined Director Welter's report a little late, but my comment is that the info is getting out as far as what's being spent on renewables, and it's commendable that you're actually considering it. Considering at the beginning of the year, we got a lot of pushback from Director Welters on renewables, but I think that you're going to see from moving forward that the public comment is going to be more towards why are we not producing? Why are we still buying the non-renewables? I also wanted to comment on the fact that I'm still opposed to spending 46.6 mil on the gas power generation plants. I think there's better ways to meet our needs for our peaking plant. I think we have renewables that we could spend that actually we should hold off on spending a big amount and making any kind of capital purchase on any kind of peaking plant at this point, even though we need to maintain that reserve capacity. I would like to commend Commissioner Nasser for actually participating in the public and attending the public comment and the public forum that was held earlier this week. He was the only person that seemed to stand up to the bullying and actions of a certain person as far as trying to engage the community in what our stake as stakeholders and as your income really is derived from, that you really that he was the only one who really seemed to want to hear our voices. And the voices that he would have heard would be for not ours, but experts in the field who have seen other municipalities go through the kind of discernment that our community is going through right now. And they would have heard, had they had the commissioners and the Board of Light and Power and Director Walters and I don't know, MPPA and other people would have heard, if they had been there, would have been that the cities of Traverse City, Holland, Lansing, Grand Rapids, and Detroit are looking at the benefits of non-renewables. He also would, any of them, had they shown up to engage the community, their basically customers and the people that are providing this income for them, would have heard that we are in a wonderful position being a municipal utility and customer owned, basically, because the benefits allow us flexibility. And as opposed to having to answer quarterly to stockholders, we are accountable to each other. And so that allows us to take a look at the investments that we're putting in and gauge them for long term. What are the benefits? But the board and Mr. Walters don't seem to be listening. And that concerns me as a consumer, as a customer, as your profit base, if you show a profit, when you show a profit, as someone that's going to be buying this utility from wherever we decide to get it on the long term. We need you to engage. Board of Light and Power members. This is a new growing industry. If anyone had come besides Commissioner Lasser, they also would have heard that there are curves, innovation curves, and that these innovation curves go up and down. The innovation curve for natural gas is kind of peaked. There's not a lot of innovation that can be done, but the innovation curve for solar is on the rise and it's rising quickly. So holding on to these assets for a couple of years, not leaving these assets stranded doing nothing, like North Muskegon is doing with the Cobb plant infrastructure for distribution. We have things that we can hold on to right now, use right now, and let the innovations come along. When we're talking, and case in point is storage and storage capacity and reserve capacity on solar and on wind. Yes, we know that when the sun doesn't shine, the solar panels aren't going to get any energy, blah, blah, blah. But you know what? If we store that energy in other sources, which are modular, easy to change and grow as our community does, those kind of innovations will come along, and those will be what we want to invest in and should be looking at investing in. And the community is asking you, engage with us and let us all have a voice in the process. So our ask, basically, commissioners and Mr. Walters, is engage with us. What are you afraid of? We want to move forward. We want to be leaders. Greenhaven could be a leader in this. We could be on those lists with Traverse City. We could be as innovative as Ludington was back in the 80s. We could be that as we look at what we need to do to move ahead on Harbor Island. So I implore you, don't ignore the community voice. We want renewables. I don't think you need to be bullied by Mr. Walters, and move forward with us, please. That's my comment.
Okay.
Could you state your name, please? I missed your name. I don't have her name.
Shannon Donley, SHANNON DONLEY.
I'll make a very brief comment. I know that I and others on the board sat and watched and listened to the entire presentation. We were not in that room, but we were watching Zoom, not as a group, individually. So it's not like we totally ignored it. We all listened to it. And I think the committee did a commendable job. We are doing our best to get our information out, and we'll continue to do that, and look forward to your next meeting. Rob?
Okay, Patty, go ahead. Patty Nelson.
Hi there, my name is Kent Blom. I'm using my wife's computer. And I had sent in a comment, and I was wondering, ask the board, do you plan to read those comments today into the record? And if you don't, may I read my comment?
Who was this? Oh,
Do we have his?
My name is Kent Blom, BLOHM. I live on 1820 Court in Grand Haven.
ask him to read it. We don't have it.
We do not have it. Is that what she said? We're going to ask you to read it. We have about 7 letters here that we received, and we don't seem to have that in our pile. So if you would be kind enough to read it, the floor is yours.
Certainly. And then I hope you read the other ones into the record so that everybody gets to hear them that's listening in right now. My comment is, before proceeding with the construction of a 12.5 megawatt plant on Harbor Island, I would like the board to seek more input from citizens. Due to the strong reliability of the grid, the decreasing costs of renewable energy, and the technological improvements with battery storage, this may not be a good investment. Ratepayers need a better understanding of the cost benefits of different options. Thank you.
Thank you. Rob, any more?
Anyone else have a public comment?
Rob, I think Dr. Pelandro does have his hand raised on the screen. I don't know, I think he can unmute and speak. Is that correct?
Yeah, I don't know what he's logged in as though. I don't see him in my list.
I think he's logged in as battery doctor.
Okay.
Petrangelo, we have that in front of us.
He's also.
How's that? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, real good. Thank you. Yeah, my name is Nick Petrangelo, 19212 North Shore Drive, Ferrisburg, right on the Grand Haven Ferrisburg line. And this is not to solicit business, so let's get that clear off the table from everybody listening. I've been in solar for over 30 years. And I have a battery company, was the founder of Harding Energy, which is putting up a new facility on Taylor, just before the hospital, just before the hill. So I'm in the photovoltaic industry and the battery industry. And I would like to defend to the nth degree professionally now, Mr. Walter. He has been nothing but helpful, kind, and listening with an open mind. This is a very, very complex set of events, photovoltaics plus storage. The question that I presented was a letter or was a comment to the secretary that I sent an email this afternoon. You might want to read that if you have it.
We do have it in front of us.
I think as the lady said, Shannon, unless you have some extensive experience, which I apologize for saying these things, there's a lot of dreamers in this field. I've been a dreamer for many, many years. Okay. I see the reality of this, the reality of solar, and the reality of battery storage. It's not quite as simple as a lot of people as dreamers make it to be. And I'll reemphasize my comments, having worked, and he's not my friend. This is a professional relationship. I have done no business with Grand Haven Power and Light, but I've sat down with Dave Walters and listened to him many times, and he's been nothing but cooperative. And I'll underline and star that statement. Did you find the email?
Okay. Nick, do you have anything else you'd like to say?
Sure. To reduce some of the pressure on Grand Haven Power, Board of Power and Light, we've done several throughout Western Michigan, Holland, Grand Rapids, Muskegon, Grand Haven, systems where the photovoltaic system, with or without batteries, is paid for by the owner of the business, commercial business, residential business, or residential or industrial. The agreements, as you all know, are between the customer who owns the system and the utility, ties into the system with a long-term contract. The particular individual who might own the system benefits from the tax credits, which now stand at about the mid-20%. That's a direct tax credit from the IRS. And there's also 100%, as you know, equipment write-down the first year. This is very positive for the utility because it works both on the demand side and the supply side. Some of the systems that have been put up in this area on buildings are over 300,000 watts. If there's any excess power, obviously the agreement is it goes to the utility at a certain agreed price. And also because of time of day pricing, I don't know exactly where BLP stands in that, but agreements can be made to tap into that storage, which the lady talked about, which is battery storage, most likely. There's also a lot going on with hydrogen now, but that's cutting the agreement. That's not right now, but battery is right now. And that can be agreed upon at a certain time of day pricing, and a certain percentage that's needed, and a certain access to that storage. That's all worked out in the agreements. So this is a great opportunity to have, there's a lot of roofs in this area. Most of the systems we have done are on either commercial or industrial roofs. Yes, some residential, but mostly industrial commercial. And there's a lot of space on many of those roofs. Most of them are flat, number one. Number two, next to the particular buildings, there's available land in many instances. So the photovoltaics can be put either on land-based or on roof-based. The land-based one, not that I have done, but one of my cohorts done, was over 500,000 watts. That's in Holland, right off of Route 31. So this is very real, as the lady said. The prices have come down enormously. Like I say, I've been in this for about 30 years. The prices have dropped down to about 1/10 of what they were 20 years ago. These systems are guaranteed. The photovoltaics is guaranteed for 20, 25 years with a warranty. And basically, there's no maintenance required at all. Small time, there is maintenance potentially, and that's usually with the inverter. The power that comes off the photovoltaics, as you should all know, is DC. It has to be inverted to AC and met the cycles and the graph to the grid. And that is usually the number one spot for failure or replacement, and that's pretty minimal. Other than that, there's really nothing to happen. And as you know, there's no fuel and there's no pollution. So that's, if you find the question, that's basically what I wrote in this afternoon.
Okay, thank you very much. Any comments from the board? Dave?
I can just respond for just a minute. I think there is a bit of confusion out there, and I think that the last gentleman to speak, I think he is right. I think what everyone needs to realize is that there's several different ways to implement local renewable energy and the last way is the way that any installations that we've had in the city to date on rooftops is done by private parties. The suggestion was made earlier that the city should be entering this business and installing them themselves. As the last gentleman just spoke out, that's not the most effective way, simply because the fact that the city is not a taxable entity and can't recover the tax credits. So the only way that we are installing, that any municipality is installing any rooftop solar, is for a private party to install it, and then the city buys it through a long-term power purchase agreement, which is exactly how we have acquired all of the renewable energy. None of it has been on the spot market. All of it has been in long-term contracts. So they are long-term commitments that we've made. The Tribune just reported a couple of weeks ago that some of our board members and the mayor was at a very large facility that we bought into. Again, a private party develops it. Exactly the way that it's being suggested is what happens at MPPA is all of the municipal members of MPPA get together and investigate through MPPA participation in these projects. And in that particular project, Traverse City, Holland, Grand Haven, Zeeland, many other municipalities all got together. Grand Haven was actually one of the largest participants in that project, and we committed to a very substantial sum of renewable energy, the equivalent of almost an 80-acre installation. So this would be just like, exactly like a private party coming to Grand Haven, offering to build a 80-acre facility, and we sign a 20-year contract to purchase it. That's exactly what happened. The city council approved of it last year. So we have been investigating large solar facilities that private parties are putting in, that the municipalities are buying the output from it. And we are participating, quite frankly, to the same level as Traverse City, Holland, many other communities in MPPA. And that's how they're doing it as well. So this, there's two different ways. One of them is to buy a utility scale product from a private party through MPPA. That's one way to do it. A second way to do it is for a private party to want to put it on their rooftop. And I think, as the last gentleman suggested, Grand Haven has very liberal policies to make that happen. And we facilitate it wherever we can. I think the last gentleman has put on several rooftop solars. And I think what he's saying is that Grand Haven BLP policies are very easy for the developer to work through and put the facilities on their own rooftops at their own price. And we facilitate the transaction however we can. So I think those are the two ways that we are pursuing renewable energy. And quite frankly, direct purchases of renewable energy for municipalities are just not happening because of the tax credit problem.
Okay,
Okay, we have one more, Grand Haven Energy.
Okay. Thank you. Any comments?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I've got 5 more emails that were sent, I believe, to all of us, requesting that they be read at this meeting. Now, if we were having a regular meeting without the virus, these people could stand up and talk,
I have no intention not to read them.
so we can read them.
Yes.
So if they're not on the Zoom meeting right now, you want these read?
That's the next step, but we wanted the people who were waiting to talk to have that opportunity. I should say that we are going to talk a little bit about this process at the end of the meeting and work out a format. So I'm going to ask Renee to read the ones that we have left. I think there's 1, 3 or 4.
And I compare with Renee. See what, we got the same ones?
I gave you those.
Now I have,
No, I have some you didn't give me.
There may be some that didn't come to me.
Yeah,
You can read those. She sent after the meeting started?
These are emails that were sent through their website to us.
Okay, I'd like to add that all
we
of
will
those
be
emails,
reading the ones who have requested that they be read. Okay,
John, just so you know, those emails were sent to the board. They've added me to that list at the end of the day today. So I should be getting them going forward, but before that, I don't have your emails, so.
Let me tell you what that got. You tell me what we've got.
I think that's the problem here is it apparently they posted the 5 board members on the website, but they did not include the board secretary. So when they entered into the email block of their website, it sent emails to you. Some of them were copied to the board secretary, and we were able to react to them, do what they asked to do. But if they just went to the board, we had no way of preparing for the meeting, reading them, whatever else they wanted us to do, because the board secretary, which is common, is the appropriate person to send it to.
Okay, so, but Jack, could I just read the dates off for the days? Okay, you gave us Brendan Thomas and Jeff Miller, right?
Yes, we have received those.
Okay, what about Liz Pell?
We have that.
You got that?
Yep.
Elizabeth,
We can't hear John.
what about, well, Field Reichert? He sent in something. You got that one?
We have that one. That one did not specifically ask to be read, and it has a portion of it's already been in the paper. So what we're going to do with all of them is to make them part of our record so that they can be pulled up and read at a later time if the people want to do that. They will be.
I'm not clear with what you're suggesting, Jack. Will they be in the minutes or won't they?
They'll be in the record, but they probably will not be the entire letter.
Jack, do you want me to read these?
Go right ahead and read the letters.
Okay, I'm gonna read what I have and I'm gonna look for what else came in since I picked these up. So we'll start with Elizabeth Pell, 407 Ohio Avenue. I'm asking the BLP to reconsider the master plan for the gas-powered plant. If we are to look forward to the future for Grand Haven residents and their needs, we should not be looking backwards at energy production. Your plan for gas power will become obsolete in the time frame of the 30-year bond. We must be progressive in our thinking. Let our community be a leader for others to follow. Carbon emissions will be nearly eliminated by new laws going into place within the time frame of this bond. Please tell me why your thinking is antiquated. Are you taking the easy way out because this is what was? You are elected members of the board for the people to make smart decisions for us now and future generations. I look forward to your meeting on Thursday, hoping you will at least take pause to reconsider the opinion of others. Thank you for your time, Elizabeth Pell. Kevin McLaughlin, 407 Ohio Avenue. The BLP meeting on Thursday, October 15, 2020 will be considering the future master plan for the Sim site. I have read the final plan and have some serious questions that each board member should contemplate before taking a vote. Did the board take the time to completely analyze the cost of all scenarios outlined in the report? I'm referring to pages 24 and 25. The report discusses the 4 scenarios. I am not seeing the actual cost for each line item, so question your financial accuracy for determining what is our best scenario. Did the consultant and the board seriously consider other alternatives or a combination of other energy sources such as solar and battery storage before recommending a gas-fired plant? I know it is mentioned in the report, but again, no real analysis is provided. Also following the same report, I am not seeing soil borings have been undertaken to determine the environmental contamination of the site. Page 55 gives estimated cost. Were those based on the borings? If so, where is the report? All the leading state and national experts contend that a natural gas facility will be obsolete before the bonds are paid off. Again, there is no mention of this in the report. I am not saying that a 12.5 MV megavolt, going with megawatt, is not needed. I am only requesting that you back up the statements that are made in your report. It appears to be based on opinion, not fact, as an example. You have written, and I quote, "Cost to relocate existing electrical system components, facilities, and equipment has been determined by the BLP to be cost prohibitive for customer owners. These costs should have been part of the report. You have not provided a side-by-side cost analysis of the upgrade of existing Eaton Drive Operations Center and the new 9.4 million office with observation deck. In all the reports and studies I have either read or directed, I have never seen an organization move forward without a detailed analysis of all the possible scenarios and their costs, along with the community impacts associated with each of them. Are you prepared to act as a board to make a $30 million plus decision without all the facts presented to you? If so, are you doing a disservice to this community? Thank you for allowing me to voice my concerns, Kevin McLaughlin."
Have we covered them all now?
No,
No, okay.
hold on, let me make sure I'm getting everybody here. Okay. Field Reichart. I don't see an address. We'll get it. Okay, tell us anything. Hello, gentlemen. I am so sorry that most members of the BLP board were unable to join us or apparently to listen to the community discussion on the future of energy economics last evening. We made every effort we could to include you as participants in the community discussion, as we had been told by several of you that you were interested in being involved with our group, now called the Grand Haven Energy Organization. When our invitations were declined, we reached out to Pat Bolin at the MPPA. He also declined the opportunity to present views, which were probably similar to those of your general manager and a number of you. We were pleased that John Noster was able to be in attendance. Larry Keefe could not for health reasons. Several times you have indicated an interest in participating in our events. Please note, we have 2 more scheduled, the 27th of October on future energy options and on November 10 on environmental issues. We truly hope you will join us. As you missed the opportunity last night, here's a recording of most of the meeting on YouTube. We had some technical problems at the beginning, so we are sorry everything is not here. Incidentally, the person in the picture is actually David Gard from 5 Lakes Energy. He is misidentified as Paul Isley, GVSU Associate Dean. Paul Isley is the person in the room with moderator Gail Wingelberg. And then he gives the link to the YouTube. Do you want me to read that or no? You want me to read off what the link is? We are leaving it online as we believe the community has the right to have as much access to the debate and discussion as possible. We like transparency. You were missed last night. I think you will find, listening to the recording here, that our event was not a setup. I would appreciate it if this would be read into the minutes at the beginning of your meeting on the 15th. Best wishes, Field Reichart. Next, we have Jeff Miller, 1120 South Harbor Drive. Dear Renee, if it is not too late and you can facilitate it, I would appreciate you reading into today's board meeting during the public comment section the following statement. Sorry it's so late. Thanks and much appreciated, Jeff. I am very disappointed in the Grand Haven Board of Light and Power's lack of effort to discover the true level of community support for building a new natural gas power plant. A locally owned and operated utility needs more transparency. In 2018, City Manager Pat McGinnis facilitated 2 afternoon town hall meetings related to the Sims Power Plant shutdown. Some of the results of the questionnaire that was utilized at the gatherings have substantially been cited as support and justification for building a new power plant. However, the Grand Haven Tribune reported at the time that the survey was non-scientific and was designed to generate more discussion. I'm familiar with formal survey research, and BLNP's annual customer satisfaction questionnaire was poorly constructed and lacked clarity. In no way was it a neutral, reliable, repeatable opinion survey, public opinion survey. Despite never being released or reviewed by the general public, the results are cited as another reason for support of Grand Haven having a new power plant. At a recent BL&P Board of Directors meeting, an advertising firm was hired for $48,000 to explain and generate more support of the building of a new power plant. And this week, BL&P management declined participation in and even discouraged others to engage in the Grand Haven Energy Organization's community discussions about BL&P's future. It appears that certain past and present decision makers are mistakenly trying to keep up with other cities by bolstering civic pride through generating our own electricity with a method that will be outdated in the future. The true intent of the people of Grand Haven cannot be taken into consideration without independent and verifiable information. Fortunately, there is still time for good public policy to be determined. Grand Haven's City Council has the last say on the matter and will hopefully ask the necessary questions and review all of the answers and opinions before making a final decision. Jeff Miller. Okay, Brendan Thomas. 10 Clinton Avenue. Dear Board Secretary, below is a question comment to be posed to the GHBLP for today's meeting. Why is the GHBLP and Progressive AE continuing to engage in a greenwashing campaign with regards to the methane generation units as part of the SIM site redevelopment plan? When methane that leaks during drilling or transport is taken into consideration, it is comparatively worse than coal energy generation from a climate perspective, as it is a more destructive greenhouse gas. While the BLP views gas as a bridge fuel, given high methane leakage rates, it is instead a costly bridge to nowhere. This is no time for a bridge. Clean alternatives are ready. Recent forecasts show it is cheaper to build new renewables plus storage, batteries, than to operate methane gas plants. Fossil fuel plants built today will quickly be rendered uncompetitive, burdening ratepayers with unnecessary and prohibitive costs for decades. One of Michigan's utilities, Consumers Energy, is moving toward zero net carbon emissions within 2 decades. Governor Whitmer recently set a goal to make Michigan carbon neutral by 2050. Why should Grand Haven not set the same goal of valuing air quality and climate stability? Grand Haven is already purchasing most of its electricity from the grid. The existing grid is reliable, and that electricity is getting cleaner and greener every day. Instead of committing millions to an uneconomical and inefficient gas project, the BLP could invest in sustainable energy infrastructure, including storage and energy efficiency. Not only would these investments set Grand Haven on a path to a sustainable future, they would also create jobs and boost economic growth. Why is GHBLP not considering the full life cycle of methane emissions associated with natural gas energy generation and neglecting the impact of climate change on future generations? Brendan Thomas. That's all I have in front of me.
Okay,
That's
I
what
have
came in
one-
before the meeting.
I have one more and I'll read it since you've done such a great job. I know you like to do it.
Love it.
Okay, this is from Mr. Roy Overway, 425 Sand Drive. And it's sent to myself and to Mr. McGinnis regarding the redevelopment of the diesel plant at 518 South Harbor. I'm going to summarize it. You've all taken a look at it. John will in a minute. He is an owner of a home within the Sandpiper, and they want to make us aware of their interests and concerns regarding the future development of the plant. At this point, they are aware we are soliciting RFPs for development, and they want us to know that their association would like to be represented and request one or more of our board directors to be invited to participate in the evaluation of these development options. We will have a report on that during the meeting. Are you on the board?
Yes.
Well, then we have a member of the board who is already a member of our board. So I think the communication will flow.
And I and Todd did meet with Sandpiper representatives for last Friday to talk about this. So
Okay.
that email, that particular letter was also forwarded to me, and Todd and I did meet with them and talk
Okay.
about that. Just before, is that all of them now, Ray? Rob, do we have any more that desire to talk?
I do not see any more.
Okay, I probably should say something here, and I just so everyone knows that this is being worked on, is when we did do the energy plan, part of Burns and McDonnell's contract was to collect public input. There was a big section in the report that tabulated all the comments that they received, summarized them, put them in a fashion where the board could recognize the comments that were received on various sides of an issue. And there was a substantial element of that process that involved the public. I believe exactly what everyone is suggesting. Part of the sum for the public relations firm was to do exactly the same thing. So it's being put together as we speak. There will be a public comment section page developed on our website as we move forward in this process. The end result is not tonight. It's actually the start of a process, and we have every intention of putting a direct input. You won't have to go to the other organization site to get comments. You can put the comments in. The comments will be tabulated, put into the record, not into our minutes, but into the record. And the board will be given a full report on all of the public comments that are received. And to the extent that we can answer questions and directly respond to the comments made, that is part of the engagement that we have made with the communications firm. Their job is not just to sell, as it's been proposed. Part of their job is to collect the input, tabulate it, put it together in some sort of fashion, and then report back to the board and the public on what the comments are that they received. Probably a bit better process than what we've had today, because these letters will be put in that same public comment, will be responded to accordingly.
Okay, thank you very much. I believe we are now moving into the general manager's report, which is 5A and B.
First item 5A, we have 3 purchase orders, relatively routine. For the most part, we're starting to buy materials for the voltage conversion project. If you remember, we have some older portions of our system that are at a lower primary voltage and that it's becoming obsolete. So we are sequentially going through. We just finished a section that was originated on Taylor Street. This project will originate on First Street, kind of in the downtown area. But we will be basically converting that lower voltage to a higher voltage to improve its distribution efficiencies. But you'll start seeing some of the equipment being ordered, and then as we move forward, you'll start seeing contracts for construction as well. So I think these are the just 3. You'll start as we're spreading our board meetings or having multiple board meetings as well. You'll see fewer on each agenda, but we are trying to order the equipment for that.
Would you like those in one motion or 3? One motion to cover 1, 2, and 3. Comments or questions? All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Carries. Next item.
I think the next couple items, I think we'll probably turn it over to Eric. I know we have Golder on the phone, and Eric, I think you've kind of originated this also. If we can Rob, if we can bring the Golder representative onto the call, and I will try to share the screen and advance the presentation appropriately here.
Okay, Eric, it's all yours.
Tiffany, can you hear us and are you on?
I am. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. So
Very good.
I'll introduce Tiffany Johnson. She is our project manager with Golder Engineering. And they've been working at Harbor Island since 2017. The board originally started its environmental studies around 2014, 2015 with soils and structures, and then they switched to ERM. But when the CCR rules were finalized and you guys started moving into compliance on that, you brought Golder in, and that made a lot of sense. And I haven't had any experience with Golder prior to working for Grand Haven, but I do have a lot of experience with CCR impoundments because I worked at a coal-fired power plant for 11 years. When I came here, the first thing I did was contact the other people that were using Golder, Consumers, Lansing, Holland. Consumers was probably the go ahead, Jack, I'm sorry.
I think we should introduce this topic.
I will in just a
Okay,
second.
Okay,
That's what I'm working on.
all right.
So I talked to Consumers, and their coal combustion residual impoundments are much, much larger than Grand Haven's. And their impoundments aren't really more complex. Our site is small, and our impoundments are really small. But given the past historical uses on Harbor Island, it's a really, really complex site. It's no secret that the island was previously the former city dump, or at least part of it, a part of the dump. And it's no secret that the community intended to use ash from units 1 and 2 when they voted to build those units back in the late 1950s. They were constructed in 1960 and put online. And I found a really interesting statement in the Grand Haven Tribune in 1958. And I think it's important to understand this in the context of the discussion we're about to have, or that Golder is about to inform you guys on. So in the Tribune, February 7th, 1958, a statement was made that ash fill from the steam plant will gradually eliminate the marshy areas on the island. Additional fill will be provided by the city dump, the boundaries of which can be shifted. Made land of this character has infinite possibilities. So what we're dealing with today isn't the case of a company behaving badly. It's a community that owned its own electric utility, and when they built the first couple of coal-fired units on Harbor Island, they intended to build the island up over time using bottom ash from units 1 and 2, and that's exactly what they did for almost 2 decades. That's a lot of material. And so our first priority, from my position at least, needs to be protection of human health and the environment. What do we need to gather and collect to ensure that human health and the environment is protected? And we have to be data driven on how we pick our mitigation strategy going forward. Golder has given us a lot of good guidance and given us a lot of good recommendations and required us to gather the best data that we can get so they can develop the best mitigation strategy. These guys are a national environmental firm. They got licensed environmental engineers, geologists, hydrologists, water chemistry experts. Their collective resources, knowledge, and experience, it's significant. So when Tiffany's going through this presentation, and Tiffany Johnson is the lead engineer for this project, she has a team of people working under her. Dawn, Carolyn, and Dave Rogabudo, and I'll butcher his last name a little bit. I'm sorry for that. You'll hear a little bit from Dave, but Dawn and Carolyn, who won't be speaking, they're the behind-the-scenes scientists that are analyzing the data and doing the statistical analysis. She's got a team of people just dedicated to Harbor Island. So with that, I will turn it over to Tiffany. Tiffany, Dave's got the screen up. Can you see it?
I can, yes, thank you.
Yep, it's fine.
Okay.
We have a little bit of problem here because the screen is on one screen. We do not have it in the, we do not have it in the click share. So,
Can you pull it down on your screen?
no, it's not working. So we
Okay.
have it on their screen, but we do not have it on our screen. So it's not working properly. So maybe if Rob can come in here, we could try.
Rob, can you come in for a second?
Take a stretch. Or better yet.
It doesn't work. It's not working. So this does not.
It's up there now.
You guys ready for me?
Are you guys ready?
You guys
Tiffany,
ready?
you see the slide? Do you see it, the presentation now?
I do, thank you.
If you can just tell me when to advance, I'll advance it accordingly.
I will do. Thanks, Dave.
Mhm.
All right, so yes, thank you very much for your time this evening, and so that we can go into a little bit of detail on what we've been doing at the JB Sims site here for the Grand Haven Board of Light and Power. And as Eric said, Golder's, we don't just operate in the US, we operate all over the world. We have about 6,500 employees, and we've been in business for about 60 years. Actually, this year was our 60-year anniversary. So I'm speaking today as the professional engineer on the site. My name is Tiffany Johnson. I've been with Golder over 20 years and in the business 24 years. Also joining me today will be Dave Rigabudo. He is our certified professional geologist, and he has over 34 years in the business of hydrogeology and remediation in the state of Michigan. So could you go ahead and move to the next slide, Dave? Thank you. So today we're going to be talking about giving you an update of the site conditions right now at JB Sims. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the closure activities and corrective actions that we've taken since April. Some of the status updates for the Unit 3 impoundments, some additional information on the Unit 1 and 2 impoundment, our recommendation for steps forward, and then our summary that we'd like to, our wrap up of what we'd like the board to take away. So next screen, please. So before we get started, just wanted to quickly give a little bit of the work that's been done at the site since 2014. So as Eric noted, Soils and Structures and Environmental Resource Management, or ERM, started compliance work at the site. And they started with some delineation of ash, and also started to place groundwater monitoring wells on the site. Golder came in 2017 And we started to help with the coal combustion residuals rule compliance work. So that included all of the different reports that were required per the rule and groundwater monitoring. So this particular website that you see up right now, hopefully you've all had a chance to review it, but this has all of the data that's available and reports that have been prepared for the site. Everything is up to date, and we anticipate the next report to be added to the site will be the 2020 groundwater monitoring report. Okay, so we'll start with the update on site conditions. All right, so just wanted to quickly show this slide and the next slide. These were two slides that we actually presented directly to the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, or the EPA, and the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy, or you might hear us call them EGLE. So just for future reference, EGLE means that's the Michigan Environmental Agency. So this slide was presented back in April, basically showing the site conditions at that time, where there were record high water levels in Lake Michigan, which then also translated to high water levels in the Grand River, and thus, as you can see, flooding at the JB Sims site. So at that point, we were just about ready to start some remediation efforts on the existing, what we call the coal combustion residuals, or CCR, units that are present at the site. So the next slide there shows a more recent photo of the island. So August is when this was taken. We also presented this to EPA and EGLE to show that we still have standing water on the site. There are several areas on the site that have been dry in the past, which are now underwater. And we still have a situation with some of the impoundments that make it unsafe to continue work there. Next slide, please. Okay, so I wanted to give everyone an overview of the coal combustion residuals units that we're working with at the site. So as you can see on the left is Unit 3. This is the active impoundment that was primarily used for bottom ash at the site. The wetted area there is about 1/2 acre for each side. And then the Unit 1 and 2 impoundments, those are the older impoundments that, sorry, I should mention for Unit 3, the CCR placement was ceased as of July of this year. Unit 1 and 2 placement was ceased in 2012, and this is an incised unit, meaning it's basically level with the ground. There are no berms around it, whereas Unit 3 has some perimeter berms. The wetted area here is about 1.2 acres. And I should note that these, as Eric noted, these are relatively smaller CCR units. Golder's largest US project is a 420 acre ash pond that holds about 25 million cubic yards of coal combustion residuals. And our largest project in Michigan is 290 acres, which is a landfill. And that one has 11 million cubic yards of ash. So the two of these combined, units 1 and 2 and 3, account for about 35,000 cubic yards of ash is an estimate of what's being held or has been held in those units. Okay, next slide, please, Dave. Okay, so I'm going to give you a quick update on closure activities. So next slide again, please. All right, so wanted to quickly go over Unit 3. So Unit 3 is an impoundment that was constructed above ground with an engineered and documented clay liner. So within the Unit 3 impoundments, we've stopped receiving coal combustion residuals as of July of this year. The outfall has been closed and it's no longer in service. The coal combustion residuals have been mostly removed from both the east and west side of the impoundment. It's a little hard to see, but there is a centerline berm that separates the two separate individual ponds within Unit 3 impoundment. The spillways and the piping have been removed from the centerline berm, which you can see right down the centerline there. And right now we're working through, so we've got most of the CCR removed and we're working through the closure mechanisms for this unit. We've gone through a couple of discussions and iterations with that plan with Eagle. And the current plan is to obviously to remove the CCR and leave a majority of the clay liner in place. And we will document that liner, the clay liner is removed, or the CCR has been removed properly using some what we call lines of evidence for construction quality assurance. So those lines of evidence include, we compare our excavation grades to the original documented top of clay liner. We take photographic documentation. We also use what's called a colorimetric analysis, where we compare the color of the ash that was in the ponds. So bottom ash is a dark gray, and the particle shape and size is rough, and it's almost like a sand particle. And then we compare that to the clay liner, which obviously is a much different color. It's more tan brown, and the particles of clay are flat as opposed to roundish, which the bottom ash particles would be. So that's one of the steps. And then the last step will be to use an analytical method. So we'll compare an analytical, we'll take samples of the soil, the clay liner soil, at the same frequencies that we take the colorimetric samples, and determine if we've cleaned the ash out from those ponds. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so additional corrective actions taken. So as I've noted before, we had a virtual meeting with the EPA and Eagle in April, and we basically at that point told them, given the site conditions, we're not able to move forward at this point. It's not safe because of the high groundwater levels. So we asked them for guidance on how to best move forward. While we were waiting for that decision or a response, we in June decided that we worked with Grand Haven and talked about it internally with Golder, that we should start to develop an increased water testing program. So that included testing the surrounding waters of the site, so within the Grand River and the wetland waters that are surrounding the site. And this information will help us determine hopefully an additional closure and remediation strategy for especially the Unit 1 and 2 ponds. Then in August, after we've gathered lots of data, in August, we presented those preliminary results of data to Eagle and EPA, again with another virtual meeting. And our determination, and this will be explained in a lot more detail later, but we wanted to present that data along with a remediation strategy for using a mixing zone. So basically a mixing zone is, it's a program allowed within Eagle, which allows either a point discharge, like for instance, a discharge from a pond, a non-contact cooling water, for instance, discharge from a pond, or what's called a non-point discharge mixing zone, which would be where groundwater meets the surface water of the state. So Golder has had this strategy approved for other CCR sites within Michigan with Eagle. And it should be also noted that this facility has had previous point discharge mixing zones approved through NPDES permitting at the site. And NPDES, for those of you that don't know, is the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System permitting process, where it basically allows you to discharge waters to the state. And the site has had those permits at the site previously. All right, so one thing also to note is, although when we presented the mixing zone idea to Eagle and EPA at the August 2020 meeting, they did not give us an immediate response, which is not surprising. But we emphasize that this is a recognized remediation method going forward, and that we have presented this data and successfully at other sites. Okay, so in preparation of our, of our mixing zone determination, we gave the Eagle and EPA our data. So we gave them that preliminary data in September. And then this October, we've prepared the request for the mixing zone determination. And we're prepared to present that to Eagle if the board concurs with that portion of our compliance strategy. Okay, next slide. Oh, thank you, got it. Okay, some other actions that we've taken. So in April 2020, we asked the EPA for clarification on a few items with regards to the Unit 1 and 2 impoundment, and also Unit 3. We'll get to that a little bit later. But because of the physical circumstances at the site, the high water levels, we wanted to get their opinion on and clarification on how to achieve the maximum effective environmental protection with regards to the inactive units 1 and 2 impoundment. So we received a letter back from July 13th on this question and a couple others, which we'll display later, but an answer was not received on this particular item in that letter. So we followed up again because we didn't get that answer. We followed up again with the EPA and Eagle in September, asking them, because they've worked with sites all over the country. The EPA has and Eagle has in Michigan, if they knew of any other similar sites to Harbor Island and the difficulties that we have here in the historic uses. EPA noted that they did not know of any other similar sites to Harbor Island. Eagle did note that there were some similarities to BC Cobb, but Golder does have experience working with BC Cobb, and it is not similar to Unit 1 and 2 for what we were looking for. So just to give you a bit of history, so up until April 2020, the board and Golder had worked together along with the state to basically to start removal of ash within the Unit 1 and 2 impoundments. So the plans were submitted to Eagle. A wetland permit was applied for, but because of the high water levels, they weren't able to grant that to us. And the work was actually bid out to several bidders, and a bidder was awarded. The bid was awarded to a contractor. So we, given the extraordinary high water levels and flooding at the site, that had prevented us from doing the work safely to not only the environment, but also to the workers and people working on the site as originally planned. Next slide, Dave, please. Okay, so some additional clarifications. So again, given that we had a stall in our strategy, we implemented some additional corrective actions with regards to increasing water sampling and to determine the impacts of the groundwater quality we were seeing within the island versus the surrounding water bodies. So we have evaluated those test results, and we'll talk even more about this prepared suggested alternative strategy to regulate and monitor the site, mixing zone being part of that strategy. And the board has been in pretty regular dialogue with both the EPA and Eagle to identify additional applicable compliance methods in the absence of being able to perform work on Unit 1 and 2 due to the flood conditions and historic uses at the site. Okay, let's move on to the status of the Unit 3 closure. So next slide, please. Thank you. Okay, so right now for the Unit 3 east and west bottom ash ponds. So again, one of the questions we asked the EPA in July, or in April, and we received the response in July, was the applicability of the CCR Rule 2, Unit 3. They absolutely agreed that the Unit 3 impoundments meet the definition of an existing CCR impoundment. And, we had already been doing all of the work to comply with the CCR rule at that point. So therefore, not only does the CCR rule apply, but also Michigan Part 115 statute applies to the Unit 3 impoundments. So some items that we've done so far, obviously the waste has been, is no longer going to the ponds as of July. and a notification of intent to close these Unit 3 impoundments was placed in the operating record, was sent to Eagle, and was also placed on the public website August 24th, 2020. We've gone through the site-specific colorimetric baseline testing. So again, if you recall, that's the difference. So microscopically, we can tell the difference between the clay that we want to leave in place and the ash that we want to remove. And that plan has been submitted to, that colorimetric testing plan and a construction quality assurance plan has been submitted to Eagle August 28th, and we've received comments on that, so we're working on that now, the revised comments. As you saw from the picture earlier, the CCR materials have been substantially removed from the east and west impoundments. And one thing I wanted to note too, because this helps with the mixing zone determination as well, is that the Unit 3 east and west impoundments were primarily used for bottom ash, blow down water, and wet flue gas desulfurization waters from the plant. So those types of waters and CCR materials have their own associated groundwater, or have their own associated water chemistry. So what we've seen, and we'll describe that a little bit further, is that the water in those ponds is not statistically similar to what we're seeing in the groundwater wells. And like I said, Golder and the board are working with Eagle to bring the Unit 3 surface impoundments to closure, and our goal is to have those closed by the end of the year. Okay, thank you. All right, so further evaluation on the Unit 1 and 2 impoundment. Thanks, Dave. All right, so as far as the applicability of the rule, the CCR rule to Units 1 and 2, that was another question we'd asked, and EPA's response was that Unit 1 and 2 is an inactive surface impoundment because even though we stopped placing CCR materials in those units, or excuse me, in that unit in 2012, it still contained CCR and liquids after October 2015. So therefore, the CCR rule applies, and that's why we're continuing to move forward with working with EPA on that particular unit. The other thing to note is that the term inactive CCR surface impoundment is currently not defined in the Eagle Part 115 statute, so it is our opinion that the Part 115 statute does not apply to Units 1 and 2. So that leads us to compliance under the groundwater surface water interface, which is, I explained that a little bit before, but that's under Michigan Part 201 and Part 31. And this is where we would like to apply a mixing zone based criteria. And it should be noted that, you know, the use of mixing zones for the JB Sims plant in the Grand River is not new. The only difference is that these were point source discharges that were permitted under Part 31, which is the the NPDES mechanism. The proposed groundwater surface water interface mixing zone that we would like to apply for and we are recommending is being requested as a non-point source determination under Part 201. Okay, a little bit of additional information here on Unit 1 and 2. So Unit 1 and 2, when it was active, and I'll show you a picture in a couple of slides, was one impoundment. So even though if you look at aerial photographs, there's a road that separates them, they're still hydraulically connected. So it's all one impoundment. And we defined the boundaries of that impoundment based off of historical photographs, which we poured through as many as we could find, historical construction information that we received from Grand Haven, and lots of good construction photos that were taken of the site at various points in history. And, you know, we've delineated Unit 1 and 2 based off of that. And but not including any ash that was beneficially used as island fill over 40 years ago, as Eric noted when we started this conversation. So given that, and based on guidance from Eagle during a meeting that we had with them in October of last year, basically a mark in time. So what's called the Act 641 Act, which was dated January 1979. So any waste placed prior to that date would be considered island fill, and anything after that date, and it's very well documented in the photographs and construction records, Unit 1 and 2 was built as a separate unit and has defined boundaries. We submitted this delineation report to Eagle in October, and they had a few comments, and we submitted it to them again in November. So another thing to note is that preliminary review of the groundwater analytical data indicates that, so we do have some elevated constituents of concern, but they are not the result of the CCR units. They're likely from alternate sources such as road salts. So Dave Rigobudo will talk a little bit more about those. He's the expert on that. So, okay, next slide, please. Okay, so this is a dual photographs here, hopefully showing a little bit better what I described on the last slide. So we've got a picture here from 1978 on the left. And you can see that the ash was concentrated in the area contained within the ash placement for Unit 1 and 2, excuse me, was concentrated within that red dashed boundary. And that, taking into account the 1979 rule, the January 1979 Act 641 rule, looking at all of the historical photographs, we have delineated Unit 1 and 2 as shown here. So on the right is somewhat current conditions and what the delineation line looks like now. So as you can see, a lot of the wetted area is a little bit smaller than where the ash placement was historically used for Unit 1 and 2. Next slide, please. Okay, so the way we've assessed the site to date, so there are lots of complicated past uses of Harbor Island. As Eric noted, the island was home to a portion of the city dump site for many decades. Prior to the power plant being on the site, there was coal stored on the island for residential home heating. And much of Harbor Island was built up by ash fill material generated from Units 1 and 2, which filled in a previous delta of the Grand River. And that material has largely been undisturbed for over 40 years. So these areas are, what most of the island fill is made from. Given that, it's going to be not feasible to return, the former delta back to its original conditions. We know that groundwater underlying the surface impoundments is hydraulically connected to the Grand River, and we'll show you some groundwater maps that show that. And as we've noted, while some material removal within Unit 1 and 2 and Unit 3 is anticipated and reasonable, it is also reasonable to conclude that there will be a considerable amount of the historic ash fill and other waste that will remain in place. Disturbance of these materials could lead to other environmental concerns as well. So that's why, our strategy is recommended going forward. Part of it is the mixing zone. And of course, as with any other site, ongoing water quality analysis will continue for many years, and that will be required. Okay, so as I noted, so I wanted to show you a couple of groundwater maps. We've prepared multiple groundwater contour maps for JB Sims. The amount of time that we measure water levels the frequency has ranged from semi-annual to as frequently as weekly water measurements, especially over the past 6 to 8 months due to the rising water levels in the Grand River. So a couple things to point with this. This first contour map was prepared for a sampling event in November of 2019. Hopefully you all can see this, but centered right around unit 1 and 2, the groundwater flow was radially outward, and you can see the arrows that are pointing outward. Another thing to note is that the groundwater elevations across the site do not vary by much. It, maybe a foot or less is what they, over this area, is the variation in groundwater levels. This data we collected using the existing monitoring wells on site. So monitoring wells are denoted by the MW. Also, staff gauges within, we've got one within the Grand River here and several others within the the impoundments and also the surrounding wetlands. So we wanted to make sure that we were trying to get a picture of what was going on in the entire island. Okay, next slide, please. So where November 2019 was a more normal picture of what groundwater looks like at the site, this is June 2020, and this is, this one shows there's influence from the Grand River and the site-wide flooding conditions. So again, I know it's a little hard to see, but you can see there's still some radial outward flow from the unit 1 and 2. However, there is significant increase and reversal of flow given the groundwater levels in Grand River. So water is now starting to flow inward on the south, somewhat inward over here on the east as well. Oh, could you go back, please? I just want to point out one more thing, please, Dave. Thank you. Wanted to also note these green. So the other thing different from the other slide is these green locations are where we've taken surface water samples. So when I say surface water, I mean the wetlands and Grand River. Okay, thanks, Dave. All right, so when we take all of this groundwater data, we don't just take water levels, we also take groundwater samples for analytical analysis, and we send it to the lab. So we, site conditions, we take that data so that we can evaluate site conditions. And obviously, from what we've told you and what we know of the data from the site, it's kind of difficult to distinguish groundwater discharge from on-site units versus the underlying historical CCR and other non-native fill material, such as the city dump. So we do what's called a geochemical fingerprint. And this is very valuable to us. And this utilizes statistical comparisons to see, where we have connections and comparisons. So geochemical fingerprinting, I liken it to, so for instance, fingerprinting for fly ash versus bottom ash is similar to your own fingerprint being unique to you. So it's a method that we like to use. So two of those methods that we like to use for geochemical fingerprinting are called stiff and Piper diagrams. So with Piper diagrams, those are the ones that are included in this triangle here. So Piper diagrams are evaluated based off of the ratios between two select constituents, whereas the stiff diagrams, the samples are evaluated based on shape. So they're also called butterfly diagrams. You can kind of see why they're called that. And what we do is we look at the shape, and they can be smaller or bigger than one another and still be statistically similar, but the shape is where we are looking for differences. So one thing to note is within this purple box, we have the surface water samples. So these were the samples that were taken from the Grand River and the surrounding wetlands. And you can see the shape is very linear. There's hardly any triangular effect at all. And then if you look at the box to the right within the red rectangle, those samples were taken from the water within the CCR units. So you can see the shape is not similar at all. So we can use this information and show statistically that the water coming from the unit 1 and 2 water ponds, is not statistically similar to what's the samples that we've taken from Grand River. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Dave Rigobudo to talk a little bit more about the mixing zone determination and what that means for the site.
Okay, thanks, Tiffany. You can take a break. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, very good. All right, well, so Tiffany has explained in a couple spots that Golder has recommended to the board that we approach the state, the Eagle, with a request for a mixing zone determination. And this is because we recognize that there are site-wide issues with groundwater quality due in large part to the presence of coal ash and other waste materials that predate and that are located beneath the ponds at Sims. So we'd like to make use of the provision in existing provision in Michigan law. Tiffany's mentioned Part 201 that statutorily provides for the ability to come up with an Eagle approved mixing zone, provided that we document that conditions are appropriate. We know that groundwater at the site under normal hydraulic conditions discharges to the Grand River and the wetlands that are connected to the Grand River. And we know that we have coal ash constituents of concern. We're finding that the most feasible way to document that those conditions are still compliant with Michigan water quality criteria is through a monitored groundwater surface water mixing zone. So the department has its own internal guidance on the application of mixing zones. That's an image from the guidance on the right-hand side. And there is another larger guidance document that is available via the Eagles website. So the most important thing to document in a mixing zone request, and we have one that we've prepared in draft form that we can finalize if the board elects to go this route. The most important site data to document is that groundwater constituent concentrations do not exceed the criteria, the surface water quality criteria that the Eagle has established and that they periodically update that take into account possible acute effects. So in the 3 years that we've been monitoring water quality at Sims, we have taken this into consideration. Okay, the next frame, if we can move to that, this is another depiction of the site. And with respect to the actual groundwater surface water mixing zone, that proposed boundary is represented by the green dashed line. It's about 1,900 feet. And if you were to compare this with the groundwater flow map that Tiffany just described, that green boundary represents where groundwater that is positioned downflow from the ponds would eventually meet the surface water in the Grand River and the hydraulically contiguous wetlands. So we have done mixing calculations that take into account the position and the length of the proposed GSI. At the site, we have a total of 10 monitor wells. Those are displayed on this map. 2 of them are installed on the north and south sides of the large wetland east of Sims. 4 of them are installed immediately adjacent to the impoundment ponds. And then there are 4 located right along the water's edge. And so the actual points of compliance for showing that a mixing zone is feasible would be from the groundwater analytical results for the 4 wells along the water's edge. So based on the data that we've come up with over the past 3 years, we think that a mixing zone is regulatorily feasible based on the comparison with the Eagle's surface water quality criteria. And we can move to the next slide. So again, we've been monitoring just about quarterly for more than 3 years. We are finding that the detections of some constituents that we don't think are due to the coal ash materials in the impoundments, primarily chloride. There are elevated concentrations of chloride in some of the wells along water's edge. We're convinced that the chloride is likely due to road salt. Could also be from some of the older wastes beneath the area, but elevated chloride we never find that associated with coal ash. So we're certain that's not due to SIMS operations. Early on during our monitoring, but not for more than 3 years, we've had 2 results in one of the wells for total sulfate that exceeded the Eagle's acute criterion, the so-called final acute value. Otherwise, we have not seen this anywhere along water's edge. So within the proposed mixing zone determination request that we'd like to give to the Eagle, we've also shown that because of the tremendous flow in the Grand River, there will be plenty of mixing afforded once that groundwater eventually emerges across the groundwater surface water interface. And even under drought conditions, for which the Eagle has provided published estimates, even under drought conditions, the factor of mixing between the surface water flow and the groundwater flow that would reach the river is greater than a factor of 5,000. So just on that kind of an analytical basis, it documents to the Eagle that there would be ample mixing achieved. So based on available mixing and based on our comparison of our quarterly groundwater analytical results over the past 3 years, we're finding that the site-wide conditions are feasible for going for a mixing zone. And given that the indications of groundwater quality and impacts extend far beyond SIMS's own operations, we think it's a feasible way to achieve compliance for the whole area. All right, so we can move on to a summary for the next slide. Tiffany, did you want to wrap this up, or would you like to go through this?
I can wrap it up, Dave.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, so to wrap up Dave's, technical analysis there, we believe that the use of the mixing zone is protective of the environment because the groundwater leaving the site at the groundwater surface water interface does not exceed those final acute values that Dave was talking about earlier. And while there is, we do have, groundwater impacts when we sample a well immediately adjacent to the island fill or the units, these contaminant levels drop at the GSI to below the final acute values at the wells closest to the river. And given this conclusion from the GSI mixing zone analysis, we recommend this Eagle provided remediation strategy because they did recommend that we use this as well as the best course forward to properly address contamination on site, while also mitigating the potential for increased impact on the Grand River. So for instance, during remediation and mitigation efforts. And to further, point that disturbing the historical island ash fill on the site is, in our opinion, not in the best interest of protecting the environment. Okay, next slide. All right, so Golder's recommendations for step forwards. So, based off of all of the data that we have collected for the site and our knowledge of CCR sites. So for our closure strategy, the closure by removal for ash for Unit 3 impoundment is recommended based off of the lines of evidence that I talked about. For instance, the grades matching the top of liner grades that were constructed using the colorimetric analysis, photo documentation, and also analytical of the soils. We recommend that we request a groundwater surface water interface mixing zone determination and analysis. We submit this to Eagle, again, as we believe that this mixing zone determination is preferred and is an applicable part of the overall remedial strategy for the site, obviously if the board concurs. Removing ash from Unit 1 and 2 may be impracticable due to the high water levels and the possible increase in groundwater disturbance in the surrounding wetlands. So, we've recognized that, right now, given the high water levels, it's not safe to do anything in those units just yet. Going forward, part of the closure strategy for Unit 1 and 2 could be capping and leaving the ash in place, or possibly using a dredging method if it can be done safely and the groundwater levels in conjunction with lowered Grand River levels. And regardless of any remedial action we go forward with for Unit 1 or 2, a long-term post-closure monitoring plan will be required. So, we'll prepare this as a response activity plan under Part 201, and that'll include not only monitoring for the mixing zone and the GSI, but also for the rest of the wells on site, possibly more, we're not sure. And then a post-closure monitoring plan, which would include monitoring of the closure strategy that we use for Unit 1 and 2. So either the cap or removal, and then groundwater, monitoring the groundwater, focusing on the applicable mixing zone based GSI criteria. Okay, next couple slides there for our summary. All right, so as we're wrapping up here, these are some of the main summary points we'd like to leave with the board. So, Golder has documented the closure process for Unit 3, and we're working with Eagle on the final closure mechanism, and we hope to have that completed here within the next couple of months. And we are continuing to pursue closure options and remedial strategies for Unit 1 and 2, which includes the delineation based off of the Act 641 rule, which was actually, again, suggested by Eagle when we started the process. We would like to pursue or recommend pursuing a mixing zone determination from Eagle based on the site data that meets the requirements of a mixing zone based GSI criteria, as we demonstrated. And then Golder and also the board will continue our dialogue with both the state and federal agencies to ensure that our approach meets acceptable closure requirements and we can achieve compliance with applicable criteria at the site. Lastly, the public and the board can be confident that Golder has gathered the data necessary. We've properly assessed the data and the site, and our recommended strategy provides proper protection for human health and the environment. So thank you very much for your time. We appreciate being able to speak with you about the updates on the CCR units and remedial strategy for the JB Sims site. Thank you.
Thanks, Tiffany. I guess we'll open it up for any questions that the board has, since Golder's available to answer them directly.
I have a couple questions. If I, we're going to fill in the hole where we dredged out of number 3 with dirt,
Yes, that's our intention.
and we're going to fill in 1 and 2 with dirt, not try to dredge it.
It will be filled in and then capped with a clay barrier to avoid any further infiltration of surface water.
So what about the water that's in it?
That will remain in it.
So you're going to put dirt in it, but the water will flow out of it, won't it? If you fill it with dirt, that water is going to go somewhere.
Yes.
Is it above the allowed limits? The water that's sitting in 1 and 2? Is the water in
Allowed limits. We
Yeah,
don't have limits of,
the set criteria for the contaminants?
Tiffany, you're probably better adept at answering this question.
Yeah, so if the capping method is what we move forward based off of our, continued dialogue with Eagle and EPA, there would be a displacement of the water that is currently within the impoundment. So we would have to go through additional, probably permitting for that if needed.
I can't get it.
I think we're talking about two separate things here.
The water that is in the pond.
It
1
will
and 2.
become groundwater and continue to flow. The groundwater flows under the island now.
But if we take dirt and put it on top of the water to fill in those ponds.
The water will seep through the dirt and it will become part of the groundwater.
Overflow, right?
Yeah, this is Dave.
It'll overflow.
Okay.
Go ahead, Dave.
It depends. It's a good question. If you were to all at once backfill the volume of that impoundment, yes, the water would overflow. It's a matter of how, at what rate you would backfill the pond. If you do it at the proper rate, and add it slowly, eventually the water level, as it saturates the material that you use to backfill the pond, will settle back down to the approximate groundwater elevation just by gravity. And eventually you'll end up with the ability to place more unsaturated material towards the top of the pond.
So it's a timing issue.
It's a timing issue, yes.
Okay, one other question. The water, if you gradually filled in the hole and the water was absorbed into the ground, is the water that is currently in the ponds, does it exceed the FAV?
That I do not know. I haven't seen the latest surface water analytical.
Okay. Well, a couple other questions. What happens if we cap 3 and we fill in 1 and 2 without dredging it, and 3 years from now, the wells that we're using to check where the groundwater meets the river show excessive contamination? What can we do at that point? Is that possible? The water level goes up or down?
It's always possible. What I would expect is that once units 1, 2 are filled and capped, you would expect that concentrations in groundwater immediately adjacent to that area would start to fall, because the capping then reduces the amount of infiltration into that material. If we were to request and be granted a mixing zone, every monitored mixing zone has a a contingency plan required with it. If we were to see groundwater constituent concentrations at the GSI wells begin to creep up, the first thing the Eagle would require is a little bit more assessment. And, you know, in worst case scenario, you might have to go for some other alternative if you could not remain compliant.
Okay. And then I'll leave you alone after this question. If the river goes up or down, is that going to impact the solution that you're proposing?
Well, the short answer is no. We do see the river go up and down. And when the river rises faster than groundwater levels inland can respond, then yeah, river water is being forced into the groundwater.
Right.
If anything, that would have kind of a washing effect.
It'd be a positive effect. Yeah.
Yeah, it would be positive. In fact, we have gone through all of our monitoring events and looked at the sampling dates that coincide with that reversal where the river is higher than the groundwater. What we're finding is that it does not really affect the groundwater constituent concentrations that much. They don't respond quickly. And I think that's just an indication that because these ash materials that predate SIMS, they're so widespread and they've been there so long that they've been reaching the river for a long time, and a temporary reversal of the flow direction over a period of weeks is not going to make that much of a difference. So what is important to the Eagle is that when you are sampling these compliance wells, that you document that the flow direction has been from the island toward the river for a continuous duration of about 2 weeks. Otherwise, it's possible that you could be actually incorporating surface water into your groundwater sample. That's the most important consideration.
So if over a period of years, if the water level in the river drops, would that possibly pose a situation where we exceed the FAV?
Anything's possible, but in my experience, no. A drop in the groundwater elevations under the island in response to a drop in the Grand River elevation, I would not expect it would have any kind of exacerbating impact on constituent concentrations.
This one I actually have some experience on. We had a landfill at my previous employer that was not lined. And so what we would see is when groundwater elevations were low, we didn't see hits in our downstream monitoring wells, but when they rose and the groundwater got into ash that hadn't been wet for 10, 15, 20 years, you'd see a fresh hit of contaminants in your downstream wells. So based on the experience that I've had, you would see the rise in contaminants when you were at the higher water levels because that ash isn't normally in water, but the other ash that is normally in the groundwater, and I'm not saying it's a good thing, but it's been in the water for a while and it's flushed those contaminants out. That's not where you see your impacts. They stabilize over time. Like for these impoundments, well, we would cap it with clay. The material would be a porous material in the interior. I'm hesitant to say this, and I do want to look and verify it, but the issue is not the water in the impoundment, it's the groundwater that has all the ash. So we're not required to, we were required to sample the surrounding waterways and the impoundment. That's what we felt we needed to do to help drive our decisions. And so that's why we started taking the impoundment water sampling. And I'm going to double check, but I believe, going off memory, the issue is you have higher contaminants in the groundwater. It's not from the ponded water in the impoundment. So if you fill but I'm going to double check, and I will make sure I say something on this next time we meet. But that is why we did it, because we wanted to know, Jesus, is it the water in the impoundment that's impacting the groundwater, or is it the water that's migrated through all that ash that has been used as fill 40 plus years ago? My recollection is the impoundment water has less concentration than the groundwater, but I'm going to double check. So
If you pump that impounded water out, would it just fill up again? Would the groundwater
Oh,
just fill it
yeah.
up again?
Oh, absolutely. And that was one of the concerns this spring, is there was no way we could dewater quick enough. We were going to route it through the Unit 3 impoundments and discharge it out the plant like we're permitted to do. The problem is we've exceeded the capacity because there was so much water. And so if we dewater this island, where we go with that water is the Grand River. And that's pumping that groundwater out and slugging the Grand River. And then whatever we disturb in the process of digging and dredging. And I'm glad we hit the pause button. It wasn't the right decision. Now, if we were in a historically dry period, we might be having a different conversation.
Well, I think we have to have a little bit of discussion here.
Well, I just wondered if they had questions or we have a discussion now. Go ahead.
Is there any more questions on what Golder has? Because then we probably should get into what their recommendation are and whether the board agrees with the course going forward. In essence, what we've struggled with here is that all of the regulations that we're trying to clean up is the centers around the impoundments. So that requires that Golder delineate the impoundments, and particularly for 1 and 2, you can delineate where the quote impoundment is, but we know that there's ash, and in Unit 3's circumstance, we found ash under the impoundment. In Units 1 and 2, we're finding ash around the impoundments. And we know that there's ash that was used as quote beneficial fill. We also know that there was city dump and other waste on the island. So what they're saying is that they can do a lot of remediation activities in the impoundment, which is what we were trying to do. But at the end of the day, we would spend a bunch of money looking at that, and we are only kind of treating the symptoms, not the total illness. So what they're suggesting is that we bring the monitoring, instead of just focusing on the impoundment, to bring it to the river interface. And first and foremost is to prove to the public that all this ash on the island is not impacting the river. We had some statements made in the paper about the potential contamination in the river. So this particular study is at the river interface, and it's showing that there is no contamination into the river or flowing down the river or affecting our drinking water. I think that's the biggest, the biggest thing that we can find out of this. The next thing is that we have to say, okay, how do we treat this? How do we best? And what Golder is recommending is they say, let's look at this interface and let's focus our attention on monitoring the river, capping and closing the impoundments. And correct me if I'm wrong here. I'm just trying to summarize in my own mind so that you can correct me if I'm wrong, but close the impoundments and then continue to monitor this interface so that we can ensure the public that while we have contaminants that are being left in place, we are not exceeding any impact on the river itself. And we still may find contaminants when we put a well directly into the groundwater, but what we're concerned about is that river interface. Is that?
Yeah, I mean, without question, the water quality on Harbor Island is not good. But it's good news with what we found in the surrounding waterways. I mean, not finding exceedance is the final acute value, not finding that toxicity in this, that's good news. I mean, that's what we want to find. So I'm glad we did the analysis. Again, we're not required to by law, but it was good data. It'll help drive our decisions going forward. So it's good to find good stuff every now and good news, even when you've got a bad situation.
So what exactly, this recommendation to go forward with the CSI, I think the bottom line is it's basically a strategy, a different strategy recommended by Golder. I think what they're asking us as the board and management here we're recommending that strategy or recommending that we listen to Golder and file this paperwork that's as necessary. But it is an alternate strategy to what we have kind of used before. So I think, if I put myself in your shoes, I wouldn't really know what, I mean, this is what our consultants and management is recommending. And I'm talking about management here with Eric. I'm not really, I guess that's what we should be questioning. I mean, do you feel comfortable doing that or directing them to do something else? And I'm not exactly sure what that is, but I guess Eric, I guess that's what we're asked to do tonight, correct?
Right. And Eagle is struggling with this site, and so is the EPA. It's not an easy soundbite answer, and it doesn't fit into the cookie cutter approach of the regulations. So they're going to struggle too as we move forward. This will be good data for them. They'll need it. Yeah, we're going to have to submit the information and the request to them so that they can review it and then decide how best to move forward.
We have to have a plan for if it doesn't work, right? If I understood correctly.
Yes.
And so that you'll tell us what that is eventually.
Well, the data will tell us if we have to start taking action. That we'll be required to submit our remedial action plan if conditions change. Not like any landfill that's been closed. They are always required to submit a remedial action plan if site conditions change through monitoring after they close a landfill. Same thing, only in this case, it's not really a landfill. It's an old dump in an island that was filled in with ash.
So the motion would be that we accept the recommendation of Golder that they file the documents and papers necessary and continue to work with Eagle and EPA.
Correct.
Can I have a motion?
I'll make a motion. Second.
And it is supported. Further comments? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Oh, roll call? Okay, we're going to do a roll call.
Director Crum,
Yes.
Director Keith, Director Noster,
Yes.
Director Witherell,
Yes.
Chairperson Smant.
Yes, motion carries. Next item. We should thank them for the,
And nice job, Tiffany and Dave. Thank you very much.
Glad to join
Thank
you.
you. Yes, very glad to join you. We appreciate being able to work with you guys. Thank you.
we need your speaker on.
Next item on the agenda is a recommendation from Erica in a leading a discussion on proceeding on the master plan.
So bear with me for just a couple minutes. I want to walk through some things that hopefully will help frame this picture and bring some things to light. So over the past 3.5 years since I've been here, but even more important, over the past 8 years, the board has been studying. Is this on? Can you guys hear me? How does it sound like? Yeah, it's nice and good. How about now? Rebooted? No? Dave, can we switch for a minute? Can I sit down?
Yes, please.
I don't need the computer. Can you guys hear me now? Okay, sorry about that. Batteries must have died on the mic. So I'll start again. So over the past 3.5 years, since I've been here, but even more important, over the past 8 years the board's been studying how best to manage your power supply and evaluate the options for this community as Sims reach the end of its useful life. And we've made a lot of really big decisions and strategically moved forward with each piece of this puzzle following the closure Sims. But really the biggest decision you guys made was to develop a diversified power supply portfolio. Move your eggs out of one singular basket and put it into a whole host of baskets. Spread out your risk. So we've given a lot of presentations in the past 6-7 months, and it is hard to see the picture of the puzzle when you're just getting individual pieces. So let's tie it all together. So demolition, it's going really well, and we're within our original timelines and budget estimations. Snow melt, the construction of the snow melt's nearly complete. The system's been flushed. We're putting the finishing touches on it. It's going to be operational within the next 30 days. Most importantly, though, what we all feared would be this really unmanageable cost to keep this system, which was originally estimated at $2.5 million by the original engineers, GMB, and even Burns and McDonnell confirmed that an alternate solution was going to be really expensive. It turned out to be much less than we thought. And when all this is said and done, we're going to do this cheaper than had we contracted everything out, because we have had some scope changes with the air dirt separator. So our lowest bid was roughly $1 million, but with these scope changes, it would have creeped up, understandably, right? We're going to get it to come in at about $1 million. Now we came to you and we said, look, we think we can do it for 750. And actually, without all those scope changes and COVID and higher labor costs, we would have pulled that off. So I'm still really happy with where we ended up. I think it's a good solution. Staff reductions made with no terminations, closing a coal-fired power plant. That's outstanding. Our workforce reduction by attrition and restructuring is ahead of schedule by what we told the board in June of 2018. And if we get an opportunity, I think it will be important down the road to talk about just what those savings and staff reductions has been. And remember, we didn't terminate anybody. We just restructured.
Can't hear anything.
We are getting a new cord and we'll be back up in a minute. Mark, can you hear me?
Yes.
We had a power outage due to a laptop dying, so it will be just a couple minutes. They're rebooting. They've started the meeting.
Okay.
Sorry for the delay. They're taking this opportunity to take restroom breaks, so it may be a minute.
Apologize to the audience. We needed to reboot a computer that was controlling the Zoom meeting. We're taking a short break and we'll be back in session in a couple minutes here. If you just stand by, we're right in the middle of a presentation. We'll get it booted back up and be back and let everybody back into the meeting. Before we start the meeting, I want to give your presentation up here. I'm not sure if you got 2,000 many of them floating around. I want to make sure that we get the right one.
See if,
Did we get the right, I got the right presentation of his put up here, but I don't know if we got the right presentation of his.
works now.
That's kind of weird, it's when you, it was just weird, because it was like, make contact with the podium and then it went off.
Eric, we can hear you. We just, Dave has not shared his screen yet, but, so you got at least the audio working now.
Oh, yeah, I asked.
Okay, we're good. Chair will back in session.
Okay,
Good to go? Okay, thank you. So from what it sounds like, it got cut out when we were talking about staff reduction. So I'll go through that one more time. So on staff reductions, we made it with no terminations. We closed a coal-fired power plant and we shrunk our workforce through attrition and restaffing them in other departments and restructuring the department. So the workforce reduction by attrition and restructuring our people, we're ahead of schedule. And from what we told the board in June 2018, and we really haven't devoted much attention to it at all on just how big of a cost savings that is, but it is substantial and it's something we probably should talk about in the future. It probably is going to come up and it'll probably be important. But the main thing is our people are doing well. Their retraining's going good. They've almost completed their retraining as distribution system operators. And last month, we laid out the plan to the board for how these positions will continue to evolve. And actually, just this past week, we've been working with both the tree service crew and the distribution department and the metering department on how these system operators can serve those departments going forward so we can keep our staff numbers low, but keep our level of service really high, actually improve it. Last month, we presented the Harbor Island Master Plan based on the direction set by both the board and the council at the end of 2018 to develop a cost-effective combined heat and power facility that could provide for local capacity and also be coupled with the downtown snowmelt system. And tonight, we really provided that last piece of the puzzle, which is how do we best deal with the environmental conditions on Harbor Island? So you've got all these pieces together, but it's really hard to see the picture unless you kind of frame it all in. But what hasn't gotten a lot of attention, we talk about it, but I don't think the appreciation is there for it, is what decisions you've made and what the benefits are by moving to this diversified power supply portfolio, because it's a really catchy soundbite, but I don't think a lot of people have connected the dots as to what that really means. And I think part of our issue is scale. It's hard for people to compare the scale of what we're doing versus what we've already done. So let me see if I can help frame that a little bit. So the Assembly Solar project that we contracted out, that's 14.4 megawatts of solar. But that only provides 7 megawatts of capacity because solar's not credited at 100%. And it sounds, and I hope this doesn't happen, but I suspect it will, MISO will likely not attribute 50% capacity to solar. It will likely be less. We don't know what yet, so let's take the 50% while we have it. Now, this is a cost of capacity plus energy. But just so you can put it into a frame of reference, it's costing us about $1 million a year for that project. And that's not with escalation going forward. So there's an escalated price moving forward, but let's just use that $1 million for our reference point. At the end of this 20-year contract, you don't own anything. It's just a capacity and energy project for the next 20 years. But still, the pricing for that project was good and it was worth pursuing. That was a really good investment in this portfolio of resources that you're building. It's a good piece. You supported it. The council supported it. So now let's compare that to what we're looking at with Harbor Island. And there's a lot going on in Harbor Island, but I'm going to throw everything out except for the 12.5 megawatt plant. Let's just talk about that. That is less. The debt service on that 12.5 megawatts at 16 million, if that's really where it ends up coming in at. I mean, that's the budgetary number, much like Snowmelt. We ended up spending, Snowmelt started at 2.5 million. And look, we're going to spend $1 million on it. That's how these projects go, right? We don't want to overestimate or underestimate on the budgetary side. We want to, underpromise and overdeliver. And that's what these engineering firms do too. That's why they put such high level of contingencies on these. But let's say that the contingency of 15% and the number's spot on, and it's $16 million. At the end of that debt service life, you'll spend less than $1 million a year for that 12.5 megawatts of capacity. And that's what you'll get is about 12.5 megawatts worth of capacity from MISO. You spend less than $1 million a year. And at the end of that debt service life, you own it. You got it. It's paid for. It's done. When you buy capacity, you buy it in perpetuity. Now, the argument to that then is, we'll build it all. Well, we've been in that situation, and it doesn't give you the flexibility that small utilities like us need. in our case, this diversified power supply portfolio, or this new world that we're all operating in, is best suited for the small player, right? We can be adaptable and flexible. We don't have a large load that we're trying to meet. So this should help, I hope, with at least so we can have a discussion on scale, because I think when the public or even maybe certain board members see a number, they're like, holy cow, that's a big number. We deal in a lot of big numbers. We spend somewhere between 17 and $20 million a year in power supply. Now let's say these assets last you 50 years. That's almost $1 billion. A bill. $1 billion for the small community over a 50-year period. That's a lot of money. This 16 mil is a very, very small piece. But actually, with what we're trying to do by this diversification, these bucket of different resources, much like you would do with your own investment accounts, you don't put it all into one fund. You don't go out and buy all Netflix or all Apple. In fact, most of you buy mutual funds. That's what I do. And there's a bunch of different stocks within that mutual fund. And then you own a bunch of different mutual funds. That's the same concept we're doing here. And actually, it makes perfect sense for a small electric utility like us, just like it does for your retirement accounts. So this is only one piece. And I think it's gotten a lot of attention, and I get it. It's, you know, a large portion of the community wants local ownership, local control. They probably want us to build bigger. But I think you guys got to understand something, at least from my point of view. I will never, ever recommend something that we cannot economically justify. And that proof should be in the pudding. I came on board, I evaluated Sims, and I said, this doesn't make sense. Be careful, get out of it. And that's what we did. And then you guys said, well, I want the ability to generate half of my capacity locally. We said, well, evaluate it. I get it. I understand that concept from municipal utilities that they like to maintain local control. I come from a utility that was very important to them as well. And it didn't make sense. And we said, don't do it. This doesn't make good sense for you. It's putting too many of your eggs in that basket and the money can't be justified. But just like the snowmelt system, and like I said last meeting, I will never justify building a power plant for snowmelt. That is not our charge. But if we can come up with a creative solution that solves multiple problems and we can economically justify it from the electric ratepayer standpoint, I can get behind it and I can understand why the board and the council would want us to pursue it. It's the same concept. By modularizing the snowmelt system, we got down to a really economical system. By modularizing these smaller units, and quite frankly, they perfectly couple with snowmelt, I'm good. It makes sense. We can make this work from an electric utility standpoint, and it's actually a really good piece, but a very, very small piece of this massive portfolio that you have to build that you are going to spend a lot of money on over the next 50 years. I think we've given a lot of attention to it, but I think we're missing the big picture. And I want to make sure that, and hopefully I've done a decent enough job framing it. So I'll summarize it. The Harbor Island Master Plan solves a lot of problems, and there are a lot of problems. We just spent an hour learning about one of them tonight, and we've spent the last 3 years trying to solve the other ones. This plan makes economic sense. I would not be recommending it if it did not. For a piece of this diversified power supply portfolio that we are building with MPPA, the plan is environmentally sustainable and it will allow the incorporation of greater renewables into our portfolio as they become available. This doesn't in any way inhibit them. Actually, it complements and supplements them extremely well. The plan allows us to implement emerging technologies. When you got a baseload plant, you don't want nothing coming in and disrupting that. This is not a baseload plant. In fact, the one thing I heard Tuesday from the experts is stay away from baseload gas. Don't go to it. The big players, they're not going to be able to do that. They're going to have to incorporate something at some point. We can stay completely away from that. We are very, very fortunate in that regard. But this plan allows us to implement emerging technologies as they become feasible and economical in the future. And the plan you guys saw actually had spaces for those. People want us to move forward with solar locally. Let's try a community solar garden. It's a very small investment. It's ratepayer funded. The way we're setting everything up, we can take advantage of something like that. Now, will we start doing rooftop solar? Probably not from a utility standpoint, but you know what we will be able to do? We'll be able to show people the value of solar in Grand Haven and provide them the data from this system. And it is small, but you got to start somewhere. You have to start. This allows us a mechanism to move forward. So we're checking the box on all three: economic sense, environmental sustainability, implement emergent technologies. I am at the stage where I can recommend to the board of directors to approve the Harbor Island Master Plan. I understand some people in the public won't be happy. We will work with them and help them. And some will never see it. They'll just never see it. And others that truly are neutral, but they're trying to see the big picture, we can show them that actually our intentions and what they want, they're not out of alignment. They're actually more in alignment than they would realize. But, you know, when they don't understand the concept, and some members don't, right? We heard it on Tuesday. They don't understand the difference between megawatts and megawatt hours. That's a big stretch, right? That's kind of at a bottom level. And I get it. From our standpoint, we live it and breathe it and sleep, and, you know, we dream about it, right? We're living it all the time. So for us, it's kind of intuitive. But for a typical person in the public, I can completely understand how it is not. I get it. And I think we've done a really good job with our technical reports. I mean, there's 27 of them on our website, and that's going to be really important for your industrial customers that have the technical ability to read it and understand the justification behind it. But what we're learning is that is not very good for the average layman in the public. They're not going to get it. And so we are going to need some assistance. And I met with the communications company. Dave invited me in. I actually think they probably are the right people to help us. They can break it down so that it can illustrate to the public, this is what you say you want. This is the total package. This gas plant that's getting all this attention is a very, very small slice of a massive pie that this community is going to be paying for, like I said, well, you're going to pay it into perpetuity, or you're going to be buying power forever. It's just from where and for what, and how are you going to pigeon yourself into one resource or try to spread out your risk through a ton of resources. And that's our goal, is spread this thing out through a ton of resources. So with that, you have my recommendation, and my recommendation is to approve the master plan and direct us to move forward.
May I just put my 2 cents on? I agree with everything that Eric said. What we've tried to do tonight is we're also trying to listen to the public, all right? And some people might feel that we're not doing a very good job, but by proceeding tonight, if you, on your desk, you have a resolution. We believe we have to continue to move forward to the next phase of design work. And that's being driven by our schedule for funding. We talked earlier tonight about the short-term loan that we have. That short-term loan expires in July of next year. In June of next year, we need to go to the bond market to pay off that short-term loan. And we, at that point in time, have to know what the facilities are that we're going to construct. Now, if we are going to proceed with Eric's recommendation, we need to continue the design work. And we need to continue the engineering work, quite frankly, to answer some of the questions that were being asked. This conceptual phase that we're in right now, people are starting to tear apart the building design. That is not, I mean, that is just a conceptual idea of what that building might look like. It is not what we may arrive at after 6 months of designing a building and making sure that it's the right size and the right configuration. It is a conceptual design at this point in time. So before we approve of a project and approve of a generating plant, we need to do more work. So before you tonight is a recommendation to approve the master plan and solicit proposals from the architectural firm and the engineering firm for the next phase of the design work. Now, quite frankly, last year, when on the project definition report 1 that we awarded to Burns and McDonnell, they took that design almost, to where we might be in April of next year. we started all over again this year at looking at this new facility. We said, let's not fully design the building. Let's talk about it in a conceptual nature so that we don't do that again. All right. So we don't go through the full design process, which cost us almost $200,000. We spent a fraction of that amount to design a master plan. Now we need to go to the next phase of actually putting firm costs, firm engineering that was contained in the project definition report 1, but is not contained in the master plan. So our recommendation is that we go on to the next phase. This doesn't mean that the board is, at this point in time, approving a contractor, approving a funding amount. What we're trying to do is move on, spend the engineering. At the same time, we have every reason that we're going to continue the dialogue with the community. We're going to put the website up to gain public input. And we're also going to start explaining some of the benefits that Eric just went through, that we have all the reasons why we're recommending you move forward is not getting out in the public. We've found tonight there's tons of questions. So we're going to, as we move in this next 6 months and finish the design concepts, our recommendation is that we respond to all the questions, that we have public forums, that we answer the questions, and to the extent that we need, and we need to do it in a coordinated fashion, not just a bunch of emails coming in like this. And we don't, I don't know what you plan on doing those, but we need to organize that community, public input, like we did when we did our engineering, our energy plan in 2018. And so during that final engineering phase, we will be interacting with the public similar to what we did in 2018, which is all documented, which is all tabulated and formulated. And some people have suggested that we didn't do a scientific analysis. We did a lot of public input in 2018. We're going to do it again in 2020. At the same token, we're going to be proceeding so that we can, if we come to next spring, we'll have all of our questions answered, and we're then able to propose a project and get council approval and board approval. I think we've all had discussions with council as well. My understanding is, and Eric and I are going back in November to talk to them about your actions tonight. I think there's at least enough support on the boards and councils to continue to move forward to get to that answer. And in the process, we want to show a commitment to the public that we're going to answer their questions as well. So that's the resolution before you. I think on your desk you have a proposed resolution. Eric's recommendation, I echo his recommendation, is to pass the resolution and approve the conceptual plan and direct staff to gain proposals that we would bring back to you next month to continue the definition of this project that we're talking about.
Okay, you heard that.
Before I make the motion, I would just like to say that if I hadn't been sitting here the last 16 years, I would be in the other camp. I would be saying, what in the heck are we doing? But I have sat here, and I particularly cite the last 8 years where the entire thing has changed and flip-flopped. So I would like to make the motion to approve the conceptual master plan and program statement presented to the board by Progressive A&E at our September 17th, 2020 board meeting, and to direct staff to solicit proposals for more detailed architectural design, engineering services for the board approval in the November, to enable the board in November to go to City Council on the project for approval of the bond financing for May 2021.
Is that supported?
I'll support.
Okay. Comments or questions?
I have a few things I'd like to say. I want to start by thanking Eric for his work.
Thanks, Sean.
You are a real asset to this organization. And I know there are a lot of people that appreciate you. You have, you've done yeoman's work in terms of, as you alluded to, Sims, evaluation of Sims, decision to take it down. Your work in being able to not have to fire any staff with the project, retraining people. The presentation tonight regarding the environmental conditions and all the work that you've done over months and months on that is really appreciated.
Thank you.
And all the work that you've done on the plan that is before us. I know you've spent thousands of hours on it, and you deserve our appreciation and our respect, and I would give you that certainly.
Thank you.
That said, because I don't want you to misinterpret what I'm going to say.
Sure.
This is not directed at you personally, Eric. I, in the past, have expressed concerns about what we're calling the plan. And I'm going to try to hone in on not the plan, but the aspects of it that have to do with the building and the generation aspect. I'm not going to go into the reasons tonight. It's late about what concerns me about it. But what I am concerned about is there seems to be this opinion that if we answer all the questions the community has, they'll be happy. And that isn't my impression of what the community wants. The community wants a say in what we're going to do. They don't just want their questions answered about the plan that's in front of us. They would like to have a say in what we're doing. There are many, many questions out there in the community, and it's obvious that the public is not ready to accept the plan without first considering and evaluating other options. Something I've been talking about now for 2 years. What are we afraid of? Somebody said that earlier. What are we afraid of in allowing the public to join us in the planning process? We need to do that. We need to allow them to buy in this project. We're going to lose if we don't. So I am concerned that I don't agree that if we approve this tonight, it's just, we haven't really finalized the plan. This is a step, a definite step towards finalization. And if the next step is in hiring architects and getting into detail, it's the step that takes us to that. We are finally approving this plan. And I'm not going to get into the questions I have about the plan tonight, but I know that the public out there feels the same way I do. A lot of them, at least. So, their feelings are, how important is to our public is it that we generate locally versus buying it? We don't really know how the public feels. I mean, you have your reasons, Eric, about why it's important that we do it the way it's being proposed, but the public, we don't really know how they feel about it. We've had people tell us on both sides. How does our public agree with the BLP using the Harbor Island Sims in the future? I'm concerned about what's the if they revise the 100-year and 500-year floodplain, what's it going to be? Or maybe they won't revise it at all, but maybe they will revise it. And I'm not willing to proceed unless we have a lot more information defining what the experts think about the public, about the Harbor Island. It's not just where the building is, it's also the roads to get into it. We have to build bridges. It's a concern. It's not defined well enough. Does our public agree with any local generation utilizing natural gas? Boy, we've had a lot of our public tell us they don't like that. So are there options to it? And of course, for me, and shared by some in our public, how important is it to have a backup source of power if the grid gets shot down by an EMP attack and is down for months? Can we live with that? Are we willing to take that risk? So anyway, I'm rather than vote no, I'm going to make a motion that we table the approval of this plan. I'm making a motion that we table this plan. At least until the other two public meetings are complete. At least until the other two public meetings that have been organized by this group are completed.
Okay. The motion we're discussing now is the substitute motion made by John. Comments or questions on it, which is to table it until,
I don't have a question. But somebody's got to take themselves out.
In the last few years, John, you have repeatedly used the word, there are lots of citizens that want answers. I'm sorry, I don't see that. I think there is a number of people, thankfully, that want answers, but that number is not a lot of people. And so I don't agree with you on that. And quite honestly, I'll never agree with you on that. I think that enough work has been put into this. We have responded to the people that have been here to ask questions, many of them, but there's two problems with the people that have come. They don't like the message, and more importantly, they don't like the messenger. Yes, Jerry Witherill.
Let me respond, Jerry. You know, this board has voted 3-2 that they're not interested in having public meetings to discuss this. And you can disagree with me as to how many people in the public, are concerned about this.
Where are they?
Well, guess what? At least over 70 of them, when you count Zoom plus the public, were at a very hastily called meeting at the community center last Tuesday. And guess what? One of the reasons why it was voted down, my motion to do that, was because we couldn't do it because of what the governor, but guess what? The governor changed the restrictions and public meetings can be had. What are we afraid of?
Nothing.
Okay, let's have it then. Let's have the public meetings.
any comments from the other board members?
Hello, can you hear me?
Motion is,
We've got too many people on, so you're gonna have, if you're not talking, please hit the microphone.
I'd like to have a roll call vote.
okay, we'll have a roll call vote.
On the table?
It was moved by John, supported by Larry,
The table.
to table.
Okay, we gotta keep the mics off when you're not speaking, because we can't, no, I can't get on, so.
Roll call vote.
So I have a motion. Was there a support?
Larry. Supported.
All right, roll call. Director Crum?
No.
Director Keefe?
Yes.
Director Nasser?
Yes.
Director Witherill?
No.
Chairperson's Mant?
No. I would like to just mention, brief comment about John saying we aren't listening, we aren't making a proper amount of approaches to the general public. I don't know how the rest of the board has received in the way of communications and requests for meetings. I've attended numerous of those. I know some of the board members were also there. We also acknowledge that we were deficient in how we distributed. Give my hands. I think Dave also gave us a good explanation on what we are going to try to do in a better way of communications. They've been meeting with a firm, and he indicated there will be additional opportunities for public input. I don't see this as the vote that is the end all. I see it as a way to give me information so that when people have questions, we have answers, such as what price-wise, system-wise, development-wise. It's that big thing out there that we have not identified. That's what we're trying to do here. I have no problem with the public meetings that have been held. I think, as I said earlier, all of us listened to it if we, and John attended. I voted to not table it because I think if we want information so that we can respond to the questions and comments, we've got to have more than we have now, and we have to have it in a systematic and layman's language so we're all on the same page. End of my comment. Now we're back to our original motion. Further discussion on it? That we had a roll call vote. It was no.
We can't hear you.
Yes. Any comments by the board members on the motion before us? Please call the roll. One, that's me.
This is the first motion.
3, 6, and 7.
Okay, this is the motion that
Yeah,
Jerry, okay.
Would you like me to read it, Renee?
I've got it. So this is the first motion by Director Witherell to approve the conceptual master plan and program statement presented to the board by Progressive AE at our September 17, 2020 board meeting, and to direct staff to solicit proposals for more detailed architectural design and engineering services for the board's approval in November to enable decisions by the board and city council on project approval and bond financing in May 2021. You supported, so roll call, right?
Roll call.
Director Crum,
Yes.
Director Kieft,
No.
Director Nasser,
No.
Director Witherell,
Yes.
Chairperson Smant.
Yes. Yes. Next item, preliminary review of diesel plant purchase and redevelopment proposals by Dave Walters and Greg Holcomb. Thank you for being so patient. We should have had you earlier in the program.
Maybe I could just key it off and then I'm going to turn it over to Greg. We have two, for those on the phone, we do have two retired generating plants that we are taking completely different courses of action on. We are looking at redeveloping the old Sims plant site, but the diesel plant site has been vacated. The substation has been removed, and we have, a few months ago, the board approved a process to entertain proposals to purchase that property. So Greg was hired by us to walk through that proposal, develop the proposal, solicit interest in it. I think you'll find that he's been very successful in his efforts. I think it was very professionally done. I have had quite a bit of discussions and walkthrough on several of the tours with the various developers that have looked at it. I think it was very, very well received, and I think you'll be pleased with the results. And with that, I'm going to get his presentation up here if I can. And
So maybe I can just start by thanking Dave and Eric and Renee. Over the last 3 months, we've been working. Dave contacted me in late June. We started to put the RFP together then. And it's not a typical commercial listing, obviously. We went in for for Director Crum. I've worked here for over 20 years on the Downtown Vision Plan, the Waterfront Plan, the Mulligan's Hollow Master Plan. Centertown, been here for over 20 years, helping with more planning efforts. But so the RFP that you saw was a much more kind of comprehensive view to give developers a better sense of, and potential purchasers, a better sense of what they're getting into as they started to respond to this. And it was, I think, well received. The next, oh, I see.
the problem is, pardon my, this is trying to share, we've got the right proposal up here. We do not have the right shared on the screen, so we're going to give us just a minute here. It's not quite as.
Thumb drive, if that would help.
No, it's up. It's just, we've got one system that controls these screens here and another system that shares it on the internet. They're
Right.
not working together.
Okay,
Right? So
sure.
Apologize.
So you have received a slightly earlier version of this earlier in the week in your packet. It's been adjusted. I'll try to point out the changes. A couple of figures were not received until Tuesday morning. But so we began in July and received the proposals you're going to see in September 30. And just a little bit of the highlight, we followed the MEDC funding model so that there's a template that the MEDC, the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, is used to help cities prepare proposals for land and development opportunities. So we tried to use that in the crafting of the RFP, sent it to over 70 companies. the usual suspects, as it were, developers, real estate folks, A&E firms, etc. Everyone was encouraged to tour, and I know Eric and Dave and Mike Kellogg and maybe other folks were involved. I actually toured the plant with Mike and had a similar awesome positive experience in that process. Also the documents, the environmental documents, phase 1 environmental, which included a very 400-page document from Fishbeck, was available to everyone. And really important, Eric and our surveyor and the city have been working on the property line encroachment issues. The plant, as you know, is in Harbor Drive right of way, as well as Sherman. And that's a sticky wicket we have to clean up before the property can be conveyed. So Eric, I want to thank you for that work. It's gone well. Next, please. A few images just for our reference. If we need to go back during the discussion, we can go. These are images in the RFP, and I threw a couple of extra ones in for you to see. We can just go through these. Drone images that we acquired to give a little perspective for people that don't know Grand Haven. That was helpful. That's kind of a money view right there, because you've got the plant, which occupies roughly half the site, and the parking lot and the Sherman uplands, let's call them, that became pretty important for people to start to think about as they got into the RFP. And then upriver to Dewey and downtown view from the west. That's okay. We can, the Sherman kind of junction there and the Y, Mulligan's, the Coast Guard, gives people perspective on, this is a junction point between really important public land, public activity, the Coast Guard, a federal presence, the Corps is in there, and then a really important neighborhood right next to the site with Sandpiper. I wanted people to be aware of the complexity of the site. Even though this is a little town, it's got a lot of interesting complexity and millions of people visiting it every year. Grand Haven's a really special place. So you've already seen these slides, but the public wouldn't have seen it. The proposals we received came into two sort of big buckets. The save and reuse the building and the demolish and build new. So we'll just go through these quickly, and then I've got detailed slides. This is the first proposal from CL Lakewood. The second is from Melching, with both save the building. The third is from Capstone, and the fourth is from Elite Hospitality Group out of Bloomfield, Oakland County on the east side of the state. So I'm going to share the three slides of each of the proposals with you. I'm happy to have questions as we go. We're also going to look at a spreadsheet after we go through the visuals that tries to summarize what we found so far. So CL Lakewood is using the building, and with three principal uses: a restaurant on the right side, the east side of the building, roughly a third of it. The rest of the main floor would be an event space for receptions and parties and so forth. And you're seeing the space on the right. You've all been inside the building. It's a magnificent space. They fully utilize it. They don't divide it at all. They actually added a mezzanine space above the mezzanine space. You can see it on the right there for additional office space. And on the back of the building, they've added some space, some office space. Next slide. This is important just to note how they've used the site. Again, using the building, they've added some parking beyond the 21 we have. So they've gone to about 41 spaces on the Harbor Drive entrance. They've also added, they're calling it a overflow parking and potentially outdoor event space, which I think is just a thoughtful use of Sherman and the whole property for parking when you need it, but also parties and other community events that might make sense for them to do. On the west side of the main floor, you can see there's an outdoor gathering space that they've incorporated in. And there's actually, adjacent to the restaurant, you can see there's an outdoor space for 5 or 6 tables there that they've incorporated. I should have started with this, but they've also saved the building, and they've saved 2 of the engines. The 2 green oblongs that you can see. I think it's in engine 2 and 3 or 3 and 4. I'm not sure what the numbers are, Eric, but they've saved 2 of them. The others would be removed, and the space would be reconfigured. The third slide in all these will be kind of the bottom line that we discovered in the proposals. So again, the image on the left, we're going to reuse the building, the restaurant, event space, and office. Their investment, their expected investment would be 5.4 million. In the square footage that they're using, it's about $250 to $300 a foot. Depends on how much extra office space they get out of the project. The site bid is, again, bottom line from the BLP perspective, their site bid would be up to 400,000, depending on acquiring and being able to use brownfield. And they also are looking for federal historic tax credits. And that's a process that the city has to be involved in and so forth. But that's the upper end of their number. Again, everything's negotiable, but that's their going in position, and we accepted it as that. CL is actually a very interesting, strong, accomplished developer out of Peru, Illinois, which happens to be on the Illinois River. Besides the Mississippi, the largest river in Illinois, kind of like the Grand. And they've also worked in Hillsdale and Manistee, and I think a couple other places in Michigan. They have an office in Hillsdale. When we get into the next comments and on the spreadsheet, you're going to see we're taking a first crack at that last comment, which it seems to fit well with the city vision and the master plan. It's really a city responsibility and a planning commission responsibility, not the BLP's or mine. But given my background and experience, I would call it a good fit because you're saving the building. The building is there already, and you're enhancing the site with the changes that they're proposing. Second, Melching, you might know Melching. They're a local West Michigan firm, especially involved in demolition. They've done major work up in Muskegon with the Sappi plant and other plants and other rehabilitations, a successful, accomplished firm. They're saving the building and adding up on Sherman 5 two-story townhomes. And so it's the building plus, and we can go through this. You can kind of see the site plan. It's up on Sherman and they're kind of stepped. This shows you the main, that's okay. Yeah, we can go on. The main floor on the left shows a combination of two-story spaces and flats. The one-story space would be the apartment condo that they're proposing, and then the others. So a total of 13 in the program. On the right side, the upper, again, divided into flats. Those are all one-floor units with elevator access. And then on the lower level, you've got the lower level of some of the townhomes. And then the big item in the lower level is they call it an entertainment venue. I've talked with the architect, Mark Oppenheisen, who many of you may know is Grand Haven, a successful Grand Haven architect, and has done a bunch of interesting projects in this area. That's probably going to be a bar restaurant. And then they have the overflow space to the west that you can see in that kind of wraparound L shape. That would be there. They also are saving one of the units, unit 7. Is that right, Eric? The last one on the west is 7. They're saving 7, which Mike Kellogg has said is his favorite engine, and he could still, I think, run it maybe today. But at any rate, they're saving that as a feature and a way to, they're actually coming in at the main level and then going downstairs into the bar restaurant, but they're also still outside with that concept. So again, those are the 2 units, 2 proposals that save the building. The next 2 are, the building goes away. Oh, sorry. Can you back up, Dave? Sorry. I meant to summarize. So Melching saves the building, 13 new condos inside the apartment, an entertainment venue, and an outside deck. They add 5 townhomes along Sherman. It's an $8 to $9 million investment, round numbers in that range, depending on what they find and so forth. The site bid is very similar, slightly different reasons, but up to 400,000. Their incentives, they're hoping for the brownfield, and they also mentioned the capital, Michigan Community Revitalization Program is one that they believe could be applied here. Again, it's a process that they would go through. Again, Melching, a local redeveloper with I'd say a very strong team experience. Their environmental consultant is Fishbeck, who did the work, the firm that did the work for you on the phase one. And then Mark Oppenheisen has a ton of local experience in historic and new build stuff. And again, I would say just kind of generically, but sincerely, this seems to fit the site well. The building's being saved and they're adding, I would say, appropriate square footage up on Sherman that would fit the current, I believe, fit the current waterfront 2 zone designation. So it's both of these first two, I think, are good fits. The third one is Capstone. Some of you may know these folks. They've been involved in the Franklin Row townhomes that are still, I think, being finished and filled, as well as the Dairy Treat project on Harbor Drive, so nearby. What you're seeing is, in their proposals for creating 8 new townhomes, these are actually duplex townhomes. So you're seeing the front elevation on the left, the back elevation, and then the side elevation using a similar brick. In fact, they want to save some of the brick and limestone lintels and details and put those into the design as you see. So they're picking up the Palladian window, rough dimensions. The cornice is at about 26 feet. The top of the parapet wall is about 28 or 29. So dimensionally, it's very similar to the present scale of the building, but it's not one building, it's 8 buildings. Go ahead, Dave. Here, this important site plan, just to kind of give you a sense. In context, on the left, obviously the Coast Guard across, they're within the WF2 35-foot elevation. They do plan rooftop access for a patio or deck up there. So there is a bit of the roofs that does go up, but I think it maxes out at 35 feet or right in that range. There is a plan for a community building and a pool. You can't see it very well, but in the back of the 6 units along Harbor Drive. They also plan a driveway onto Sherman, and how that exactly works, I'm not sure, because the elevation change is a little bit tricky, but that's their issue. And then the 2 up on Harbor Drive. So Melching had 5. These guys have the 2, which is 4 units. If we go to the next slide. The summary is, again, they're going to demolish the plant and add new homes. A total of 16 residential units. It's a $10 million plus number. So, these are roughly going to cost a roughly $1 million, 8 units, 8 million plus the site bid, which is really important for us. This is a seriously larger number than what we've seen in the other proposals. It's 1.525 million. And that's a number that they're assuming. I think they're assuming brownfield would be available to them. They didn't condition it much, but they said there'd have to be negotiations about this. But basically, if you have 16 dwelling units and 1.525, it's about 100,000 per unit that goes towards the purchase of the property, which is not unreasonable for what may be $500,000, $600,000 units or more. Depends on how they're put together. Capstone, as I mentioned, they're a local developer with several recent successful projects. They're going to reuse the diesel, so the building goes away, but they're going to capture, salvage, and reuse the diesel plant materials, the brick and lintels, and maybe other things. And they want to contribute $35,000 to the museum to help create a display about the diesel plant and the history of the 90 years of the diesel plant operation, which is kind of cool. I mentioned to a couple of these, I'm sorry if I can't quite remember who I talked with about this, but I know Holland saved an old Alice Chalmers engine, and they have it on display as a piece of sculpture. It's much more modest than the engines you have, but there may be a discussion about could an engine or a part of an engine be captured and kept in the community, maybe at Mulligan's Hollow as something to play on, or just a sculptural object. I think there's some discussion that would be kind of cool to get into with the successful developer at the end. Again, I would say To me, it seems to fit well with the city vision, the master plan, the scale, the materials. It's consistent with the work that we've done in the past on the waterfront and downtown plan. Again, it's different. You're taking the building away, it's gone, but you're creating some of there's an homage to the building scale and so forth. Then the final proposal is, again, the building goes away and the reuse is in a new 90-room hotel, 6 stories. You can see the footprint. It kind of is right in the middle on the right side. It has 90 parking spaces planned. So what I was saying before about 36 feet or whatever the at WF2, this is dramatically taller. This is a 66 to 70 foot tall building. So twice as tall, and the bulk, this is 85,000 square feet. So the footprint of the diesel plant is about 14,000 square feet, and some of the proposals add square footage and they get up to 35 to 40,000 square feet. This is more than double that. So it is a bulky building in this space. So it's quite different than the other 3. I'm gonna go ahead, Dave. These are just the back, the entrance to the hotel for cars, of course, would be in the back. Importantly, and this was very important, this group, the Elite Hospitality, purchased the Holiday Inn, the Grand Haven Spring Lake Holiday Inn, in 2018 and reinvested a couple $1 million into getting it up to speed to where it is today. So these folks know the Grand Haven Spring Lake Tri-Cities area and felt like, okay, we believe this market can support another significant, this would be a national flag hotel. We've seen them, in downtown Holland and Marriott. We've seen other flags come in, and I suspect it would be in that range. Go ahead, Dave. These guys are major, probably mid-sized, but really significant developers. Just to summarize, again, the building goes away, new hotel, 6 stories, 90 rooms with some related little shops that you'd see in a ground floor hotel. It's a $12 to $15 million investment. I guess I didn't write it in there, 85,000 square feet. So they're investing round numbers, almost $200 a square foot into this, and you get the economies of scale with that much square footage. The site bid, they're subject to the brownfield and other incentive programs, but their site bid would go up to $1 million. That's what they've stated. Again, subject to negotiation probably, as well as figuring out the programs. These guys are based in Oakland County, and they have a 22 hotel portfolio, and they have in their proposal mentioned several more hotels kind of in this brewing stage that they plan to roll out in the next couple of years. So they're in active development mode. This one I didn't know quite what to say because the fit isn't as clear to me based on the scale, the height. Is that going to be acceptable in the community, et cetera, et cetera? And again, that's a city planning commission conversation. And also the parking, does it meet it's 90 spaces. Is that what you need for a hotel? Does that satisfy the need, et cetera? That, again, it's a comment. It's not a criticism. It's just a comment that I noted. And next, yeah, that's just to bring us back and remind us of the 4. We're good there. I should say we also received, I call it 2 letters of interest, incomplete, not satisfying the requirements that we had laid out for a team and so forth. And so I think these are the 4 that we're basically going to work with, and that going forward we should dive a little deeper into potentially.
Yeah, maybe I can just, we might want to talk just a little bit about the 2 letters of interest. One of them, again, it wasn't a complete proposal. His interest is in buying the building as is and basically hanging a sign on the door, maybe potentially putting an elevator in and making it a museum. So, I mean, and it was a initial $100,000 bid. Okay, so we really didn't think it met the goals of the proposal. It was more of a letter of interest. Another developer that showed a lot of interest kind of came in late. I think he suggested that if the board wasn't happy with any of the proposals and that they wanted to start over again, he would be very interested in participating, but he just didn't have enough time to really, so we do have additional interest. And I think at this point in time, we're just focusing on the 4 proposals that met the demands of the solicitation. But we did have a couple other people that just said, you know what, we're interested. Here's a letter. If one of these doesn't move forward, you know, we're interested in talking about an alternative proposal.
Yeah, that's a great point, Dave. I had conversations with, let's call it, 1 or more members of, call it 10 different teams. And besides the 2 that actually wrote a letter, I would say at least 2 others said we might just send a letter in saying that we're interested. We think it's intriguing. And if your RFP process craters, we would be interested in further discussions. So there's probably a little more than this, but these are the 4 that satisfied our requirements on submittal. Do you want to go to the spreadsheet briefly? Again, you've had a long meeting and I don't want to extend this any more than necessary, but just to give you a sense of how we've started to break down and analyze these, you've heard the kind of highlights. Then you've got the spreadsheet, I think a larger enlargement of the spreadsheet in front of you. Trying to put it all in one page is always a little tricky, but I find it helpful to kind of glance and look through it like this. And I'll just say that I think our work, the BLP work, sure.
Rob, are you seeing that?
Yeah, Dave, I can see it. If you could zoom in a little bit, it would be helpful. It's pretty small.
Okay, great.
So I think the BLP responsibility, and I'll just say my responsibility, goes down to the yellow block on the left. So the upper half of the spreadsheet summarizes kind of what I've said. There's a little bit more detail in the square footages, the parking spaces, but the rest of the spreadsheet I just want to touch on briefly. As well, this may come into your judgment as well. The fit, I call it fit with the master plan, and that breaks down into the site, the neighborhood, and the community. So what I've tried to do is, this is not a definitive assessment, but it's try to give you a first cut at how this feels to me and to the team. The architectural design heritage, the legacy of the plant, its design, and importantly, even though it's a public building, the public never was able to really get into the building except special tours and things like this. And it's a remarkable building. It's been sitting there for 90 years. It's a really cool design. It's a neoclassical design of first order, and it's been useful to the community for a long time. So thinking about that, obviously the first 2 proposals address that directly. I think the capstone is interesting in that they pick up the design, they pick up the materials, and they're willing to put an exhibit together at the museum with the museum potentially. And I shouldn't dismiss Elite, because they did talk about picking up the Grand River aspect of the community into their design. They didn't express it, but they did talk about it. So it's important. They may be able to come up with some cool designs. And then kind of towards the bottom, the impacts on the community in terms of economic, and those are just really a summary of the estimated investments. And for tax base, roughly half those numbers are what you generally use to go in. I just plugged a position for jobs creation, because that is important for the chamber and for the economy and to some extent the tax base, but also just vitality. There are construction jobs as well as ongoing jobs. I'd like to talk with the chamber about what those numbers might be, or we can talk to the chamber and other folks about the jobs impact that will come out of this. And then again, that's a little squishy, but vitality and vibrancy in the residential life of the community, the commercial life, and the visitor tourism life of the community. You know, adding more residential units is helpful in our shortage of housing in our communities along West Michigan. A new identity restaurant, a new entertainment space, a new venue for local and visitor parties, a new hotel. I mean, new hotels are a big shot in the arm. They have national advertising. They can do a lot of good things for communities, and it's an important one to think about. But that's a first cut at those other qualities of how we can look at the 4 proposals. And I guess I'd like to just kind of leave it there, but if there are any quick questions or obvious questions, and then where we go from here is what I think we definitely want to talk about, and Dave has some ideas about that as well. So
anybody have any questions?
I didn't pick up on the changes from the original packet to this packet. Nothing jumped out at me.
The key was the 2 proposals that didn't identify the amount of the site bid. And the up to 400,000, I got both sets of comments within an hour of them, and they had the same number for different reasons. So to me, that kind of says there's a 5% factor that they're allocating towards the site versus the $1.5 million towards a $10 million project. That's a 15% kind of cost allocation. But they were both relying on incentive programs to figure those numbers out. But that was the big change. And I just changed a few of the parking spaces I hadn't quite figured out correctly, and relatively minor though. Yeah.
I have a comment, Jack.
Go ahead.
Over here. How could you forget me, right?
I purposely looked the other way, John.
This property is owned by the city, not by the BLP. And it will take 4 votes of city council to approve any divestation of the project or any leasing of the land. When are we going to get them more involved in this?
I think you're jumping right into what next step. Let's first.
It's a little late.
Well, I think we first need to be very clear about what portion of the charter applies, what process we're following. And you are right, it is in the name of the city, but this is property that was retained by the BLP for electric purposes, which is specifically designated in the charter of how you deal with it. So what we're following is the section of the charter, and I discussed this with both of our attorneys. My understanding and their understanding of the process is the BLP sells the property, and that sale transaction has to be approved by 4 members of council. So that's the process under which we're operating. Obviously, the BLP has now received proposals. We now need to put together a proposal or a transaction selecting one of these, if that's what the board wants to do, that will receive 4 votes of council. So it is not on your agenda tonight to act on. I agree with you, John. It would be entirely inappropriate to act and select a proposal without the city council being asked and discussed and appropriately. I don't think from our perspective, we need to get a proposal that will, first of all, your obligation, as far as I understand it, is to liquidate property and get a fair return for the money that the electric utility has invested in developing the property. The city council's responsibility is to make sure that that transaction is consistent with their ideas and that sort of thing. We have to satisfy both bodies. So we started here. I think we've said all along that we are not going to proceed, obviously, without 4 votes of council, because that's what's required. But if you read the section of the charter that you're referring to that requires the 4 votes of council, it says that the BLP sells the property. So That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to follow that process. Our recommendation, and I talked about this with Greg, I think this is your presentation. I think we need to all think about it. Like I said, I've already met with some of the people around, and I think the commitment that we've made, and I think what Greg has put in here, is that the developer is going to have to sell this to the city and the planning commission. That's not the BLP's responsibility. And obviously the BLP will probably have to approve some sort of contingent offer or proposal that then the developer has to go and get all the necessary approvals. I don't think anybody suggested that that doesn't happen. And I think, John, very early on, you said, you know, when are we going to involve the planning commission? Well, the planning commission will be involved to review the proposal that the developer proposes. And it's the developer's responsibility to go to the planning commission, and they're in a position to make concessions, make changes. The BLP isn't. So I think what our recommendation is to accept the report, assign a board member or two board members, and I would suggest that we continue to work with Greg and have Greg and one or two board members meet with a couple council members, Pat McGinnis, Planning Commission, anything else, that then can discuss the various proposals. I think Greg has put a lot of effort and work into getting all the necessary information from the developers to develop the proposal, and then see if there is a single proposal that both the board and the council can agree to. So that's the process that I guess we've come up with. I guess you can throw stones at it or come up with a different one. But at the end of the day, short of having a joint meeting and discussing it all together, which I don't think would be entirely appropriate at this point in time, but I think we do need to establish some sort of subcommittee, and council needs to establish some sort of subcommittee and start talking about this process at that level, and then present recommendations back to both boards and council to determine, you know, how we move forward.
So you're going to form both council, ask council to, and we would have a subcommittee and they would work together. That's what I'm interested in, Dave, working together. And it sounds like that's what your plan is.
It always was. It's not new.
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
Yeah, it is.
Let's move on. Let's move on to what the board wishes to do. And their recommendation is to have a subcommittee work with the city and Greg and proceed in the process. Can I have a motion?
We need a motion for this? I thought we weren't going to vote on this tonight.
The motion will be to form the subcommittee of our organization.
Well, I'll make that motion.
Is there a support?
I'll support it if you add to it to work with a subcommittee from council.
I took myself out.
Would you put it in
That
there?
was in my comments.
Will you put it in the motion?
Yes.
Great.
Is it supported? Jerry
I'll
made the
support it.
motion. Okay. And we'll do this all at once. I will appoint Jerry Witherall and Todd Crum to be the two members. So if you vote for the motion, then that will be taken care of also. I'll ask, you want a roll call or just a voice? Okay, we want a roll call.
Director Crum,
Yes.
Director Kieft,
Yes.
Director Nasser,
Yes.
Director Witherell,
Yes.
Chairperson Smann.
Yes, motion carries. Thank you very much, Greg. I have a hunch we'll see more of you.
Sounds good. Look forward to it.
We're down, I think we're down to other business. I have a comment I'd like to make, and that deals with how we Thank you. I would like to have you think about how we can better handle the letters that are coming in, what type of process we should have. Because I think we probably will be getting more. And I've served on boards where we have had a little different process, but I don't want to get into that tonight. So think about it. We'll talk about it at the next board meeting. And the idea is to acknowledge the letters. The question is, do we want to read them all, or how do we want to handle it? We can accept them, and we can read them. We can accept them and put them into the minutes. Think about it. We'll talk about it later. Motion to adjourn.
Jack, I have a comment before we adjourn.
Go ahead.
I'd like to remind the board of the next two meetings to be held by the Grand Haven Energy Association. There'll be a meeting on Tuesday, October 27th at 7 p.m. at the Grand Haven Community Center. The moderator will be our former Representative John Jellema, and the subject will be discussing energy options now and in the future for Grand Haven. And then the third meeting will be on Tuesday, November 10th at 7 p.m. in the Grand Haven Community Center. Monitor will be former Grand Haven Mayor Roger Bergman. And the community discussion will be on the environmental concerns of energy for Grand Haven. I know we all would be appreciated to be in attendance at those meetings. Thank you.
Yeah, I have already notified Field that I'll be out of the state on next meeting on the 27th. So I will not be here to attend.
Motion to adjourn.
Sorry. I just need to caution the board, all right? This is, I think you all realize this. I don't want to, but when 5 board members go to any meeting, you clearly are not at a board meeting. There's no deliberations to occur. There's no discussions to occur. If you're listening, I have no problem, but you need to be careful because these are not board meetings. If you want to classify them as board meetings, you have every authority to do that. As if you want to all participate in the meetings, the appropriate way to do that is to declare them as a board meeting. You cannot have 4 or 5, a quorum of board members, which you're imploring them to do, come sit next to and start talking to each other about this, about what's happening. We then need to post that as a board meeting.
This is not a board meeting, Dave, and it's according to the Open Meetings Act, if we are not discussing board business, it is not a board meeting. And what I'm suggesting is, in the interest of finding out what the public thinks, we should go to these meetings. And I don't agree with you, sorry.
And I agree entirely. I agree entirely. If you're going to go and you're listening, that's not a board meeting. But if you put panelists on a panel and the board starts deliberating back and forth, that is a board meeting.
Yeah.
You have 2 people from this board on a panel, that is not illegal. It has to be 3 or more to start with to be a board meeting.
Okay, a motion to adjourn has been made. All in favor, say aye. Opposed? We're finished.